Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku had grave dominion and became Undertaker? Part 1. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is Deku the Phenom, by Magireaderking. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Deku coughed, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to echo in the sterile silence of the waiting room. The air, thick with the scent of antiseptic and nervous sweat, did little to soothe his growing unease. He clutched the worn, oversized trench coat tighter around his small frame, the fabric a comforting, if somewhat suffocating, weight. It was a replica, of course, a painstakingly crafted homage to the legendary Undertaker, his hero long before the symbol of peace, all might, had even crossed his path. A robotic voice chirped, "Midoriya Izuku, room 3. Deku shuffled to his feet, his worn red boots thudding softly on the linoleum. Every step felt heavy, burdened not just by the coat, but by the secret he carried. He pushed open the door to room 3, revealing a woman with severe, dark-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, her black hair pulled back in a severe bun. This was Dr. Arisawa, a quirk specialist known for her pragmatic, almost clinical, approach. "Midoriya," she stated, not unkindly, but with an efficiency that bordered on brusque. "Please sit." Deku settled onto the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him. He watched as Dr. Arisawa clicked through a digital file on her monitor, her expression unreadable. "So," she began, turning to him, "your previous records indicate a late bloomer manifestation, with initial signs appearing just recently. Is that correct?" Deku nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am, about 6 months ago." "And the symptoms?" He hesitated, a blush creeping up his neck. "Well, it started with a kind of feeling, like a chill, and then, the shadows." Dr. Arisawa raised an eyebrow, prompting him to elaborate. "They just appear, especially when I'm feeling strong emotions, like anger or sadness. And sometimes, things break." He gestured vaguely, remembering the unfortunate incident with his alarm clock that morning, which had inexplicably shattered into a dozen pieces. She tapped a stylus against her chin. "And you say these shadows, they seem to have a will of their own." "Sometimes," Deku admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Like they're part of me, but also, not. And there's a coldness. Like a crypt." He looked down at his hands, remembering the icy sensation that often accompanied the shadow manifestations. Dr. Arisawa leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Midoriya, can you demonstrate this shadow manifestation for me?" Deku's heart pounded. This was it, the moment of truth. He closed his eyes, focusing on the prickling sensation that often preceded the shadows. He thought of his frustrations, his anxieties, the weight of expectations. Slowly, a faint, inky tendril snaked out from beneath his trench coat, weaving around his arm like a living thing. The air in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Dr. Arisawa observed with a critical eye, scribbling notes on her pad. "Fascinating. And the coldness you described? It's like a presence," Deku murmured, his eyes still closed, the shadow growing bolder, swirling around him. "Like a spectral energy. And sometimes, people, they feel it too. They get this look in their eyes, like they've seen a ghost." He thought of the terrified expressions of some bullies at school when his shadows had unexpectedly flared up. The doctor finally put down her stylus. "All right, Midoriya, based on your description, the manifestation, and the physiological response, it appears you have a heteromorphic quirk with a strong emotive trigger. The shadows are likely a form of manipulated energy or perhaps even a localized distortion of space-time, influenced by your emotional state. The coldness and the effect on others suggests a fear-inducing or aura-based component." Deku's eyes snapped open. "So, what is it? What's my quirk called?" He had always dreamed of a powerful quirk, but this was different. "Darker." Dr. Arisawa steepled her fingers. "Given the spectral quality, the chilling effect, and the clear connection to your inner emotional turmoil, I would classify it provisionally as grave dominion." Grave dominion. The words hung in the air, heavy and full of an ominous power. It wasn't one for all, or a fiery explosion, or a super-strength quirk. It was something else entirely. Something that felt intrinsically linked to the dark, legendary figure he so admired. It's a powerful quirk, Midoriya, Dr. Arasawa continued, her voice cutting through his thoughts. And potentially dangerous if not controlled. We'll need to run more tests to understand its full scope and limitations. But one thing is clear, your quirk isn't just about shadows. It's about presence. And it's about fear. Deku looked down at his trench coat, then back at his hands, where the last wisps of shadow were receding. He had come here seeking answers, perhaps even a cure for his strange affliction. Instead, he had found a name for the darkness within him. A name that resonated with the very essence of the phenom. He was no longer quirkless. He was something more. Something with the weight of the grave. And the unsettling realization filled him with both a profound sense of destiny and a creeping dread. What would he do with a quirk like grave dominion? Could he truly be a hero, with power that felt so intrinsically tied to the very things heroes fought against? It wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, not a villain attack that ripped her from his life in a blaze of glory or despair. It was the insidious creep of an illness, a quiet fading that began subtly and accelerated with a cruel, relentless pace. Inko Midoriya, ever the gentle and nurturing presence, started to tire easily. Her once bright eyes dimmed, and the worry lines etched around them deepened with each passing week. Deku, still grappling with the unsettling reality of his grave dominion quirk, tried to be her rock. He brewed her favorite green tea, read to her from her beloved romance novels, and even attempted to cook, though his culinary skills were, at best, rudimentary. The shadows, his constant companions since the doctor's visit, seemed to grow more restless with his own escalating anxiety. They coiled around him in the quiet hours of the night, a chilling manifestation of his fear. He remembered one particular evening. Inko had been drifting in and out of sleep, her breathing shallow. Deku sat by her bedside, holding her frail hand. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight, but even that couldn't disperse the oppressive gloom that clung to him. Unbidden, a thick, inky shadow snaked from beneath his bed, reaching towards his mother's bedside table, a silent, menacing tendril. He recoiled, gasping, and the shadow vanished, leaving behind only the cold prickle of his own terror. He couldn't let his quirk, his own burgeoning power, bring any more darkness into her dwindling light. The doctor's visits became more frequent, their pronouncements graver. The words, aggressive, unresponsive to treatment, and comfort care, became grim signposts on their journey. Deku felt a suffocating helplessness. His powerful quirk, capable of inspiring fear and manipulating shadows, was utterly useless against this invisible enemy. He couldn't fight it, couldn't scare it away, couldn't even touch it. One crisp autumn morning, the phone rang. Deku, who had been dozing fitfully on the couch, sprang awake with a jolt of dread. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice was soft, laced with a practiced sympathy that nonetheless felt like a blunt instrument striking his heart. "Midoriya-kun," she began, and Deku knew, even before she uttered the words. "Your mother, she passed away peacefully a few moments ago." The phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The world seemed to tilt, the vibrant colors of his small apartment draining into a monochromatic blur. He stood there, frozen, the silence of the room amplified by the sudden absence of his mother's gentle presence. Then, a tremor. It began deep within him, a seismic shift of pain and grief. His vision blurred, not with tears at first, but with an encroaching darkness. From every corner of the room, from beneath the furniture, from the very walls, shadows began to coalesce. They swirled and writhed, not the controlled, almost playful tendrils he had learned to manipulate, but a raw, untamed torrent of inky blackness. The air grew frigid, biting at his exposed skin. The few trinkets on the shelves began to vibrate, then to rattle. A framed photo of him and Inko, taken years ago at a festival, slid off the mantelpiece and shattered on the floor, the glass splintering like ice. A guttural, choked sound escaped Deku's throat, a sound he barely recognized as his own. It was a cry of pure anguish, laced with an embryonic roar of something far more primal. The shadows surged, engulfing the entire room, turning it into a swirling vortex of oppressive darkness. He felt a profound sense of loss, a void so vast it threatened to swallow him whole. And then, it happened. A chilling, spectral chill swept through the apartment, carrying with it the faint, phantom scent of lilies, Inko's favorite flower. It was a presence, mournful and profound, and for a fleeting moment, Deku felt her. Not physically, but as an echo, a resonance in the very air. He collapsed to his knees, tears finally streaming down his face, hot against the icy grip of his quirk. The shadows, still swirling, seemed to press in on him, a manifestation of his overwhelming grief. He curled into a ball, clutching the oversized trench coat, the fabric a cold, comfortless reminder of his solitary existence. In the ensuing days, the apartment remained shrouded in a perpetual gloom, a physical manifestation of Deku's inner world. The refrigerator was empty, the sink full of unwashed dishes. He barely ate, barely slept. The grave dominion was a constant, oppressive companion, responding to his every wave of sorrow with an intensified chill, a deeper darkness. The funeral was a blur of sympathetic whispers and pitying glances. All Might, hearing the news, had sent a heartfelt card and a bouquet of white roses, but even his towering presence felt diminished in the face of Deku's profound despair. Bakugo, surprisingly, showed up, standing awkwardly at the back, his usual bluster replaced by a rare, almost uncomfortable silence. But none of it mattered. Nothing could fill the gaping hole in Deku's chest. He had lost the one person who had truly believed in him, the one constant source of unconditional love. And with her passing, something fundamental shifted within him. The gentle, earnest boy who had once idolized All Might now found himself adrift in a sea of darkness, his powerful, morbid quirk responding not to a desire to save, but to the raw, visceral pain of loss. The path of the hero seemed distant, almost irrelevant. All that remained was the crushing weight of grief, and the chilling, ever-present embrace of his grave dominion. The city lights blurred past the train window, a kaleidoscope of artificial brilliance against the deepening twilight. Deku stared blankly, the rhythm of the rails doing little to soothe the gnawing emptiness inside him. It had been weeks since the funeral, and the world still felt muted, devoid of the vibrant hues that Inko had brought to his life. His grave dominion had become a restless, almost sentient extension of his grief, shadows clinging to him like a shroud, the air around him perpetually cooler than normal. He barely registered the excited chatter of other students heading home, their youthful exuberance a stark contrast to his own internal winter. He disembarked at his usual station, the familiar surroundings now tinged with a suffocating melancholy. As he walked, head bowed, towards his empty apartment, a sudden, piercing scream ripped through the evening air. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of tearing metal and a sickening squelch. Deku's head snapped up, his hero analysis instincts, dormant since his mother's passing, momentarily reawakening. Just ahead, in a narrow alleyway between two buildings, a scene of chaos unfolded. A towering, amorphous mass of viscous, green-brown sludge writhed violently, its bulbous eyes gleaming with malicious glee. Trapped within its slimy depths was a flailing figure, a boy from his school, his face contorted in terror. The sludge villain. For a moment, Deku froze. His mind screamed for him to run, to hide, to avoid any more pain. The shadows around him thickened, responding to the surge of his fear, but also, surprisingly, to a flicker of something else, an ancient, cold fury he hadn't known he possessed. This villain, this thing, was hurting someone. And in that raw, visceral moment, the pain of his own loss ignited a desperate, unfamiliar fire within him. "Stay back, kid," a gruff voice yelled. A pro-hero, Kamui Woods, was already on the scene, his wooden limbs extending, attempting to ensnare the villain. But the sludge was too agile, too slippery, easily evading the hero's attacks. Death Arms arrived moments later, throwing powerful punches that simply passed through the villain's gelatinous form. Deku watched, his heart hammering against his ribs. The heroes were struggling, the boy was suffocating, and a chilling realization dawned on him. This was a threat that conventional strength couldn't overcome. His eyes fell upon the terrified face of the trapped boy, his desperate pleas muffled by the sludge. A memory, sharp and agonizing, flashed through Deku's mind, his mother's fading breath, her hand growing cold in his. The helplessness he'd felt then, the burning desire to do something, roared to life. "Get out of here, kid. It's too dangerous," a civilian shouted, pulling their child away. But Deku didn't move. A strange, cold calm settled over him, pushing through the haze of grief. He felt the familiar surge of his quirk, but this time, it wasn't just fear or sorrow fueling it. It was a cold resolve, born from the depths of his despair. He took a shaky step forward, then another. The shadows that usually clung to his form began to extend, swirling and twisting around his feet, not like a shroud, but like spectral tendrils reaching out. The air grew noticeably colder, a palpable chill that made the nearby civilians shiver and back away further. "Hey, kid, what do you think you're doing?" Death Arms barked, momentarily distracted from the villain. The sludge villain, sensing the shift in atmosphere, turned its grotesque attention towards Deku. "Oh, what's this? Another little morsel. You reek of death. I like it." Its slimy tendril shot out, aiming for Deku's face. But as it approached, the shadows around Deku surged forward, meeting the villain's attack. They didn't punch or slice, but instead seemed to coalesce around the sludge, clinging to its surface, making it feel heavy, sluggish. A wave of intense cold emanated from Deku, so potent it seemed to freeze the very air around the villain, causing small ice crystals to form on its gooey surface. The sludge villain roared, a sound of unexpected discomfort. What is this? It's so cold. I can't move." Its movements, once fluid and rapid, became agonizingly slow, as if wading through invisible quicksand. The tendrils of Deku's grave dominion pulsed, tightening their grip, exerting an unseen pressure that seemed to compact the villain's form. This wasn't an attack of force, but of domination. The quirk wasn't destroying the sludge, it was imposing its will upon it, making it rigid, heavy, and unable to maintain its amorphous form. The villain thrashed, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of the spectral chill. "What is that quirk?" Kamui Woods exclaimed, staring wide-eyed at the scene. Deku, his face pale and set, felt an unnatural connection to the villain, a profound sense of control over its very essence. He pushed, not with muscle, but with the cold, burgeoning power of his quirk. The shadows pulsed, constricting the villain further, squeezing it with an invisible, icy vice. The sludge villain let out a final, gurgling shriek as it was compacted into a dense, immobile mass, no longer able to hold the boy within its grasp. The trapped boy coughed, sputtering, as he fell free, gasping for air. Deku swayed, the sudden exertion and the lingering grip of his grief leaving him weak. The shadows receded, leaving behind only the profound chill and the now inert, frozen lump of sludge. The pro-heroes, stunned into momentary silence, rushed forward to secure the villain. As Kamui Woods praised him and Death Arms looked at him with a mix of awe and suspicion, Deku felt a strange sense of detachment. He had saved someone. He had used his quirk, the one born from sorrow, to protect. But there was no elation, no triumphant cheer. Only the lingering cold of his grave dominion, and the stark, chilling realization that this power, forged in loss, had a purpose he had yet to fully grasp. He had faced his first villain, not as a symbol of hope, but as an unforeseen shadow in the light. The stunned silence of the pro-heroes lasted only a moment before the familiar roar of a crowd began to build. Civilians, initially fleeing, now surged forward, snapping pictures and cheering. Kamui Woods, regaining his composure, swiftly wrapped the compacted sludge villain in his wooden restraints. Death Arms, meanwhile, approached Deku, his expression a mix of professional awe and deep suspicion. "Kid," he rumbled, his voice low, "what in the world was that?" "Your quirk. I've never seen anything like it. It was like you just froze the life out of him." Deku, still reeling from the exertion and the emotional whiplash of the past few minutes, could only stammer, It's called Grave Dominion, sir." Just then, a booming, familiar laugh cut through the rising clamor. "Well done, young man. A truly heroic display." Deku's head snapped up, towering above the crowd, a blinding smile etched across his face, was All Might. The symbol of peace, in his muscular, invincible form, stood there, a beacon of hope even in the dimming light. He was holding 2 plastic bottles, presumably containing the remnants of the villain. The pro-heroes stiffened, saluting. All Might, however, paid them little mind, his brilliant blue eyes fixed on Deku. The hero then did something unexpected. He walked past Kamui Woods and Death Arms, straight towards Deku, who felt a strange mix of terror and awe. The shadows around Deku, responsive to his inner turmoil, subtly deepened, making the air around him even colder. "You, young man," All Might boomed, his voice resonating with power. He was close now, almost intimidatingly so. That was incredibly reckless. And yet, undeniably effective. To rush in when even seasoned pros were struggling, to devise a countermeasure so unique, it shows a true hero's spirit. Deku, overwhelmed, could only blush and stammer. I had to do something. They weren't. He was suffocating. The words tumbled out, raw and honest. All Might's smile softened, a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. He scanned Deku, from his trembling hands to the oversized, familiar trench coat, and the subtle, chilling aura that still clung to him. Your quirk, young man, All Might said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. It's unusual. I felt the chill from here. A very unique manifestation. Most powerful quirks are built on raw power, but yours, it's something different. What did you call it? Grave Dominion, sir, Deku whispered, still feeling the chill of his own power. All Might's brows furrowed for a split second, a hint of concern crossing his otherwise confident features. Grave Dominion, an interesting name indeed. It seems to carry a great weight. Tell me, young man, what compelled you to act? And where did you get that magnificent trench coat? All Might gestured to Deku's attire. Deku hesitated, then looked down at his coat, a comfort object turned into a symbol of his identity. My mom. She just passed away, sir, he began, his voice cracking. The shadows around him pulsed, growing slightly more pronounced. I felt helpless then. And when I saw him, suffocating, I just couldn't stand by. And this coat, it's like a tribute to my hero, the Undertaker. He always stood against fear and fought for what's right, even in the darkness. All Might's expression shifted, his smile fading, replaced by a look of profound empathy. The air around him seemed to lose some of its vibrant energy, becoming more subdued. He placed a large, gentle hand on Deku's shoulder. Deku flinched, not from pain, but from the sudden, powerful warmth that contrasted sharply with his own chilling quirk. My boy, All Might said, his voice now surprisingly gentle, stripped of its usual booming theatrics. I am truly sorry for your loss. That is a burden no young man should have to bear. But to use that pain, that deep well of empathy, to propel you into action, that is the mark of a true hero. The greatest heroes are not those who are untouched by sorrow, but those who rise above it. Then, All Might suddenly coughed, a cloud of steam erupting around him. His muscular form began to deflate rapidly, shrinking before Deku's astonished eyes until he stood before a gaunt, skeletal man with hollowed eyes and an almost sickly pallor. You're, Deku gasped, his voice barely a whisper. Indeed, young Midoriya, All Might said, now in his true, emaciated form, dabbing a speck of blood from his mouth. A secret I keep from the world, a symbol I maintain despite this limitation. And it is because of that very limitation, and what I witnessed here today, that I wish to speak with you further. I believe your unique quirk, young Midoriya, and your profound courage, have a very special part to play in the future of heroism. But first, we need to discuss how you control that grave dominion. All Might's gaze was intense, analytical, but also deeply hopeful. He saw not just a boy with a strange, dark quirk, but a nascent hero, forged in the crucible of loss, with a power unlike any he had ever encountered. The symbol of peace had met the unforeseen shadow, and the world of heroes was about to change. The revelation of All Might's true form was a shock that rippled through Deku's very core, but it was the earnest intensity in the symbol of peace's eyes that truly captivated him. Over the next 10 months, what began as an offer of mentorship slowly transformed into a unique, grueling training regimen unlike anything All Might had ever undertaken. This wasn't about transferring power, it was about forging control. Young Midoriya, All Might had explained on their first official training session, perched on a discarded refrigerator amidst the junkyard beach he used for his own training. One for all is a flame that must be passed. But your grave dominion, it is a shadow that must be tamed. My goal is not to give you a quirk, but to teach you to master the one you already possess. Deku's initial attempts were disastrous. His grief, still a raw wound, constantly threatened to overwhelm his burgeoning power. During early exercises, meant to simply manifest his shadows on command, uncontrolled surges of his quirk would send objects skittering, plunge areas into an unnatural cold, or even induce momentary, unsettling dread in All Might himself. Observe, young Midoriya, All Might would cough, quickly deflating from his muscle form after a particularly chilling outburst. Your emotions are like a torrent, and your quirk is the river that swells with it. We must build the dam. Their training became a delicate dance between physical exertion and psychological conditioning. All Might, ever the showman, would push Deku through grueling cleanup exercises at Dagoba Municipal Beach, the physical labor meant to build his stamina and focus his mind. But unlike previous hopefuls, Deku wasn't just clearing trash, he was learning to manipulate the ambient cold and density of his shadows to move colossal objects. He'd channel a low-level chill to lift smaller debris, or, with immense concentration, weave thicker, almost corporeal shadows to subtly shift larger appliances, a feat that would leave him trembling and exhausted. Think of it as extending your very presence. All Might would coach, watching Deku strain to levitate an old washing machine. Like a spectral hand, yet without touching. The Undertaker doesn't rely on brute force, does he? He relies on presence, on aura, on dominion. They spent hours on mental exercises. All Might, despite his own heroics being physical, had an innate understanding of the psychological aspect of quirks. He had Deku meditate, not just to calm his mind, but to delve into the very source of his power. You must confront the wellspring of your quirk, young Midoriya. That profound sadness, that sense of loss, it is not weakness, but the fuel for your unique strength. Learn to draw from it, not be drowned by it. Deku started by visualizing his emotions as colors, then learning to separate them, to control which ones fed his quirk. His sorrow, once a chaotic storm, slowly became a deep, resonant hum, a controlled reservoir he could tap into. He learned to differentiate the cold of his grief from the focused chill of his power. All Might also taught him the importance of his presence. He encouraged Deku to walk with purpose, to hold himself with an innate confidence, even when he felt none. The Undertaker's power isn't just in his abilities, it's in his very being. His aura, that's what grave dominion is, young Midoriya, it's your presence, amplified. The physical training was brutal, transforming Deku's scrawny frame into something lean and surprisingly resilient. But it was the mental discipline that truly honed his quirk. He learned to localize his shadows, to direct their chilling effect with precision, creating pockets of intense cold or making specific objects feel unnaturally heavy without affecting the entire area. He could now make a door creak open on its own by simply focusing his spectral presence, or cause a small object to clatter to the ground with a mere thought, the subtle power of his grave dominion at his command. By the end of the 10 months, Deku wasn't the same boy who had stumbled into the sludge incident. His oversized trench coat no longer seemed to swallow him. Instead, it felt like an extension of his evolving persona. His eyes, though still carrying the shadow of his grief, now held a newfound depth, a quiet intensity. He hadn't inherited one for all, the quirk of raw power, but he had forged something else entirely. A unique, formidable control over a power born from the depths of his own sorrow, guided by the unwavering faith of the symbol of peace. All Might, watching Deku effortlessly cause a small, rusted metal plate to float a few inches off the ground, a subtle, spectral chill emanating from it, finally gave a genuine, unforced smile. Excellent, young Midoriya, you have truly grasped the essence of your grave dominion. You are ready to stand against evil, not with my power, but with your own unique strength. Now, let us consider your next step. What do you believe is the most crucial element a hero needs to possess, beyond their quirk? The day of the UA entrance exam dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in Deku's stomach. He stood among the throng of hopefuls gathered in front of the colossal UA gates, a sea of vibrant quirks and nervous energy. His trench coat felt heavier than usual, a comforting shield against the overwhelming bustle, but also a symbol of the profound transformation he had undergone. Deku, a familiar, explosive voice ripped through the air. Bakugo Katsuki, his spiky blonde hair seemingly defying gravity, stomped past him, a scowl firmly etched on his face. Don't even think about getting in my way, you quirkless turned spooky extra. Deku felt a familiar flinch, but it was quickly superseded by the cold resolve All Might had helped him cultivate. Kachan, he said, his voice steadier than he expected. I'm not here to get in anyone's way. I'm here to become a hero. Bakugo merely scoffed, his eyes narrowing at the subtle, chilling aura Deku subconsciously emitted. Whatever, creep, just don't get frozen. Inside the auditorium, The lights dimmed as Present Mike, the voice hero, burst onto the stage, his voice amplified to ear-splitting levels. "Welcome, listeners, to the UA entrance exam. Yeah," he explained the practical exam. A 10-minute mock battle in one of several replicated cityscapes, where aspiring heroes would earn points by destroying robotic villains. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and the dreaded 0-pointer, a massive obstacle not meant for destruction. Deku listened intently, analyzing. Most quirks were about direct power, speed, or defense. His grave dominion was different. It wasn't about brute force. It was about control, disruption, and presence. When Present Mike announced the start, Deku found himself in Battle Center B, a concrete labyrinth of mock buildings. Other students shot off like rockets, their flashy quirks immediately engaging the smaller robots. Explosions, ice, hardening skin, the arena quickly became a cacophony of destruction. Deku didn't immediately rush in. He closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep breath, and letting the controlled chill of his quirk spread through him. He opened his eyes, and the world seemed to sharpen, the shadows in every alleyway becoming a potential extension of his will. His strategy was unorthodox. He wouldn't engage head-on. He would be the unseen force, the chilling presence. A 2-pointer stomped towards him, its metallic footfalls echoing. Instead of punching, Deku extended his right hand, focusing his grave dominion. A wave of intense cold washed over the robot, not freezing it solid, but making its internal mechanisms seize. The robot's joints groaned, its movements becoming sluggish, as if it were struggling against an invisible, icy current. With a surge of his will, Deku made the air around the robot dense, oppressive, causing it to buckle under the unseen pressure. It toppled over, its circuits sparking, effectively immobilized. 2 points. He moved like a phantom, his trench coat billowing slightly as he glided through the streets. He saw students struggling with more resilient 3-pointers, their attacks bouncing off the robot's armor. Deku saw an opening. As a 3-pointer bore down on a girl with a telekinetic quirk, he focused his power. A wave of profound dread, a chilling aura, washed over the robot. Its optical sensors, though lacking true emotion, seemed to flicker, as if sensing an alien presence. Simultaneously, Deku focused the cold intensity of his quirk on its leg joints, making them unnaturally stiff. The robot stumbled, its aim veering wildly, allowing the girl to blast it with a telekinetic surge. She looked around, confused, sensing the sudden, unnatural chill, but seeing no immediate cause. Deku melted back into the shadows of an alley, satisfied. He didn't need the point. He needed to help. He used his quirk subtly, causing robots to malfunction, their targeting systems to waver, their movements to slow. He wasn't collecting the most points, but he was undeniably impacting the battlefield, creating openings for others, acting as a silent, chilling force multiplier. He moved with a newfound fluidity, his control over his shadows precise enough to make him seem to vanish and reappear within the gloom of the city. He could cause a subtle cold shiver to run down a robot's metallic spine, or make an area feel unnaturally heavy, causing it to sink slightly into the ground. Then, the ground trembled. A colossal, monstrous figure rose above the buildings, the 0-pointer. It lumbered forward, its sheer size dwarfing everything around it, sending students scattering in terror. Deku, frozen for a moment by its sheer destructive power, saw a girl, pinned under rubble, her leg trapped. It was the same girl from the entrance ceremony who had stopped him from tripping. Her face was contorted in a silent scream, her eyes wide with fear as the 0-pointer advanced. His previous calculations, his strategic detachment, shattered. The helplessness he'd felt watching his mother fade, the burning need to act during the sludge incident, it all resurfaced. This wasn't about points. This was about saving. He sprinted, a cold fury rising within him, his grave dominion flaring. The air around him dropped dramatically, a visible mist forming with each of his desperate breaths. He launched himself towards the rubble, his hands outstretched, not to smash, but to influence. He focused the raw power of his quirk, pushing it to its absolute limits. The heavy concrete slabs pinning the girl shimmered, a profound cold emanating from them. He wasn't lifting them with brute force, but making their very molecules resist gravity, making them light, almost ethereal, under the intense, focused chill of his quirk. With a desperate heave, he managed to shift the heavy debris, just enough to free her. "Run!" he yelled, his voice raw, hoarse from the effort. But the zero-pointer was upon them. Its massive fist descended, a crushing blow aimed directly at the now freed girl. Without a second thought, Deku threw himself forward, pushing the girl clear. He stood his ground, facing the colossal robot, his eyes burning with a defiance born of sorrow and resolve. He channeled every ounce of his grave dominion into a single, desperate, all-encompassing aura. The zero-pointer's fist, just inches from his face, suddenly slammed into an invisible barrier. Not a physical wall, but a monumental surge of spectral cold and oppressive density. The air around its fist became a crushing, chilling force, and for a split second, the robot's immense momentum was halted, caught in an unseen, chilling vice. The metallic grind of its hydraulics shrieked under the unnatural strain. A wave of profound dread washed over the entire battle center, making even the pro-heroes observing from afar shiver. This wasn't just cold, it was the chilling embrace of the grave itself, a manifestation of pure, unadulterated dominion. Deku screamed, not in pain, but in sheer, primal exertion, his eyes glowing with an eerie, icy light. He wasn't destroying it, he was dominating it, imposing his will on its very function, slowing it, seizing it, for just a fleeting, crucial moment. Then, with a shuddering gasp, his power flickered, the immense drain overwhelming him. The zero-pointer's fist slammed down, narrowly missing him, impacting the ground with a thunderous crack, sending shockwaves through the mock city. "Time's up. Exam over." Present Mike's voice boomed, cutting through the chaos. Deku lay on the ground, gasping, his body aching, the chilling aura around him slowly dissipating. He hadn't gained a single point from the zero-pointer. But he had saved a life. As he slowly pushed himself up, looking at the girl he'd helped, a new understanding settled over him. His quirk wasn't about breaking things. It was about bending them to his will, about creating an undeniable presence, about imposing a unique form of justice. He had faced the entrance exam, not as an explosive powerhouse, but as the quiet, chilling force of the grave dominion, leaving behind a trail of unnerved robots and baffled pro-heroes. The results would be interesting, to say the least. The observation room at Ua High was a hive of focused attention, typically filled with the low hum of professional commentary and the occasional excited murmur. But as the practical portion of the entrance exam for Battle Center B concluded, a different kind of energy permeated the room, a bewildered silence, punctuated by sharp intakes of breath and bewildered murmurs. Nezu, the principal, a creature of uncanny intelligence, sat at the head of the long table, his paws steepled, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by an expression of intense, analytical curiosity. "Interesting," he chirped, breaking the quiet. "Very, very interesting." On the main screen, the replay of the zero-pointer incident was winding down, focusing on the last few seconds of Izuku Midoriya's desperate stand. The image of the massive robot's fist halting, caught in an invisible, chilling grip, was particularly striking. What in the 9 circles of Tartarus was that? Midnight purred, her eyes wide behind her mask. That wasn't just a cold quirk. It was oppressive, like walking into a mausoleum. Indeed, Power Loader grunted, adjusting his visor. His power output wasn't destructive in the traditional sense, but the environmental manipulation was undeniable. Look at the condensation forming, the way the robot's joints seized. He's not breaking it, he's forcing it to stop. A terrifying level of control over temperature and density, seemingly tied to some form of localized pressure. Present Mike, usually boisterous, had leaned back in his chair, a rare thoughtful frown on his face. His points were low, though. Only 12 villain points. Most of his attacks weren't direct KOs. He'd slow them down, make them stumble, or induce that weird chill. Other students would then finish them off. Which raises an important question. Aizawa Shota, the erasure hero, drawled from his sleeping bag, though his eyes were wide open and fixed on the screen. Is heroism about accumulating points, or about saving lives? Look at the girl he saved from the zero-pointer. He gained 0 points for that, but it was the most heroic act of that entire battle center. Snipe, the sharpshooting hero, nodded. He wasn't fighting like a brute. He was moving, adapting. Like a specter. And the sheer audacity to stand up to that zero-pointer, most kids were running screaming. And the emotional trigger is evident, Recovery Girl added, peering over her glasses. His initial movements were hesitant, but the moment that girl was in danger, his quirk flared dramatically. It's tied to his empathy, his desperate need to protect. But that kind of power born from intense emotion can be a double-edged sword. Nezu's gaze swept over the screen, lingering on Deku's slightly trembling form after the adrenaline faded. His quirk, Grave Dominion, as he informed All Might, is fascinating. It's not about overwhelming force, but about imposing will. It creates an environment where physical laws bend to his intent. Localized gravity, extreme cold, perhaps even a psychological dread effect. It speaks of a high-level cognitive understanding of his quirk, even if he's still refining it. He's like a tactical support unit in a single body, 13 mused, their suit deflating slightly. He could disable, create openings, provide cover without directly engaging, and rescue. Very versatile, if unconventional. Aizawa sat up, pulling his sleeping bag tighter. His control is impressive for someone so young, especially with such an abstract quirk. But that raw emotional power, he needs to learn to separate his personal feelings from his professional duties. That kind of grief can be a dangerous foundation for a hero. All Might, who had been listening intently, finally spoke, his voice serious, his gaunt form leaning forward. Young Midoriya has suffered a great loss recently. But it is precisely that deep capacity for empathy, that unwavering drive to save others, even when outmatched, that makes him unique. I've spent the last 10 months guiding him, not just in control, but in understanding the immense responsibility that comes with such a power. He paused, his blue eyes gleaming with conviction. He may not have a flashy, destructive quirk, but his Grave Dominion has the potential to be truly formidable. He possesses the heart of a hero. Nezu steepled his paws again, a wide, knowing smile spreading across his face. Indeed, the scores are in. While his villain points were low, his rescue points are off the charts. Unprecedented, in fact. We are not just looking for brawn, after all, but for the fundamental spirit of heroism. And young Midoriya has displayed that in spades, despite the chilling nature of his power. He clicked a button, and the image of Izuku Midoriya filled the main screen, his slightly disheveled trenchcoat and determined, grief-haunted eyes holding a quiet power. "Gentlemen and ladies," Nezu announced, his voice filled with an almost mischievous delight. "It appears we have found our newest student. A hero unlike any other. Welcome to UA, Izuku Midoriya. Let us see how the Grave Dominion truly reshapes the landscape of heroism." The first day at UA High dawned with a crispness that did little to calm Deku's nerves. He stood before the imposing 1A classroom door, his trench coat feeling heavier than usual, a self-imposed anchor against the tidal wave of anxiety. This wasn't the anonymity of middle school, this was the pinnacle of hero education, filled with the best and brightest. And him, the kid with the chilling, unconventional quirk. He slid open the door, and the chatter within immediately ceased. Every eye in the room swiveled to him. The girl he'd saved at the exam, Uraraka Ochako, gave him a warm, relieved smile, but most other faces held a mixture of curiosity and something less welcoming. "Good morning," a stiff, authoritative voice boomed. It was Iida Tenya, the spectacled boy from the exam. "You are Midoriya Izuku, correct? Your tardiness is unacceptable on the first day of our prestigious institution." Deku stammered, I just got here." Before he could properly respond, a familiar, spiky-haired figure launched himself from his desk. "Deku, you actually made it, you creepy bastard. Don't think for a second that freak quirk of yours puts you on my level." Bakugo's explosions crackled threateningly in his palms. A shiver of genuine cold rippled through the classroom, emanating from Deku. His Grave Dominion, sensitive to his stress and the sudden confrontation, was responding. The temperature in the immediate vicinity of his desk dropped noticeably, and a few students unconsciously pulled their collars tighter. Bakugo, momentarily taken aback by the sudden chill, just scoffed louder. "If you're here to make friends, you can leave," a gruff, tired voice drawled from the floor. A yellow sleeping bag stirred, and out emerged Aizawa Shota, their homeroom teacher, his dark eyes instantly fixing on Deku. "We're heroes, not socialites. Change into your gym uniforms and meet me on the training grounds." The class scrambled, a collective sigh of relief escaping them as the tension broke. Deku quickly found an empty locker in the changing room, trying to keep his distance. He could feel the eyes on him. Most people steered clear, perhaps intimidated by the residual chill of his quirk, or simply wary of the creepy kid with the dark coat. On the training grounds, Aizawa wasted no time. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. You'll be judged on your physical abilities using your quirks. Midoriya, you're up first for the softball throw. Deku walked into the pitching circle, the softball feeling oddly insubstantial in his hand. He looked at Aizawa, who simply stared back, his expression unreadable. You won't be using a physical force quirk, will you? Aizawa prompted, his voice flat. Show us what Grave Dominion can really do. Deku took a deep breath, focusing. This wasn't about power, it was about control and presence. He gripped the ball, closing his eyes for a moment. He didn't just throw it, he imposed his will upon it. A profound, almost invisible chill enveloped the softball, making it feel unnaturally heavy, yet at the same time, subtly buoyant. He didn't generate kinetic force, but rather manipulated the very density of the air around it, creating a pocket of extreme pressure and cold that propelled the ball forward. He wound up, and with a grunt of effort, released the ball. It didn't whistle through the air, it seemed to drift with an unnatural, chilling hum, leaving a faint trail of condensation. It sailed further, and further, until it was a mere speck, before finally plummeting to the earth. Aizawa looked at his measuring device. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. 802.4 meters. A collective gasp went through the class. Even Bakugo looked stunned, his jaw slightly agape. Deku hadn't thrown it with a visible explosion or a super-strength punch, but with an eerie, silent force that defied conventional understanding. The rest of the tests were similar. In the 50-meter dash, Deku used a focused application of his quirk to subtly increase the air resistance behind his classmates, or decrease it for himself, allowing him to glide with surprising speed. During the standing long jump, he made the ground beneath him feel momentarily lighter, causing him to seemingly float further. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he was consistently in the top tier, utilizing his quirk in ways no one had anticipated. His classmates watched him with a mixture of awe and growing unease. His quirk wasn't flashy like Kaminari's electricity or Kirishima's hardening, but it was undeniably effective and profoundly unsettling. The constant, subtle chill he exuded, the way he seemed to manipulate the very fabric of the air around him, made him a spectral presence among their more overt powers. As Aizawa ended the day, dismissing them with his characteristic bluntness, Deku felt a knot of something new in his stomach. It wasn't just anxiety, it was the heavy weight of expectation, and the daunting challenge of proving his unique form of heroism. He had made an impression, that was certain. But the lingering silence, the wary glances from some of his classmates, told him that his journey to becoming a hero, the Undertaker of Ua, was just beginning. He might be in the hero course, but the chilling path ahead was uniquely his own. The tension from the quirk apprehension test lingered in the air of classroom 1A the next morning. Aizawa, ever pragmatic, decided to tackle the social dynamic head-on. "All right, problem children," he grumbled, slouching at the podium. "Since you're all stuck with each other for the next 3 years, let's get the introductions over with. State your name and your quirk. Keep it brief." One by one, they went around the room. Iida Tenya, with his booming voice and engine quirk. Uraraka Ochako, her bubbly personality shining as she explained her zero gravity. Bakugo Katsuki, predictably, snarled his name and declared his explosive power, shooting a glare Deku's way. Kirishima Eijiro showcased his hardening, Yaoyorozu Momo demonstrated her creation, and Kaminari Denki nearly short-circuited explaining his electrification. The murmurs grew louder as it approached Deku's turn. All eyes, some curious, some wary, turned to him. The subtle chill of his grave dominion always seemed to accompany him, making the air around his desk feel a few degrees cooler. Deku stood, clutching the lapels of his trench coat. "I'm Midoriya Izuku," he began, his voice a little softer than others but clear. "And my quirk is Grave Dominion." A beat of silence. Then, a student with a tail, Ojiro Mashirao, ventured, "Grave Dominion. What exactly does that do?" Deku paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's not about physical destruction. It allows me to manipulate the surrounding environment by imposing a spectral presence. I can create localized extreme cold, increase or decrease density, and influence objects indirectly. It's about control and presence. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Mina Ishido, with her bright pink skin, piped up, "So, you're super spooky. Can you summon ghosts?" "No," Deku quickly replied, a blush creeping up his neck. "It's not like that. It's a chilling influence. More like making things feel heavy, or cold, or just wrong." The explanation seemed to deepen the mystery rather than clarify it, leaving many exchanging uneasy glances. Bakugo just snorted, "Still a freak quirk, Deku." Aizawa clapped his hands, cutting off further questions. "All right, enough for today." Dismissed. The next day, the air in Class 1A was thick with anticipation. Today was the day for battle training. Aizawa, true to form, wasted no time. "You'll be divided into teams of 2, 1 hero team and 1 villain team. Heroes will infiltrate a building to secure a nuclear weapon, while villains will defend it. All Might will be overseeing." The very thought of All Might watching filled Deku with a mixture of pride and intense pressure. He desperately wanted to show his mentor how far he'd come. The teams were drawn by lot. Deku's heart pounded as All Might pulled the letters. Team A, Midoriya Izuku and Uraraka Ochako. Deku felt a surge of relief and a flicker of warmth. Uraraka gave him a reassuring thumbs up. And facing them as villains. Team D, Bakugo Katsuki and Iida Tenya. A collective gasp went through the room. Bakugo's eyes, blazing with fury, immediately locked onto Deku. "Deku, you're dead," he snarled, a low growl emanating from his throat. The air around Deku, sensitive to his rising tension, grew noticeably colder, a spectral frost subtly forming around him. This wasn't just a training exercise for Bakugo, it was a personal vendetta. The battle training started with Team A as heroes, and Team D as villains. The replica skyscraper loomed large, a maze of hallways and rooms. Inside, Bakugo was already seething. "He thinks he can beat me with his damn freak show quirk. I'll blow him to pieces." Iida, ever the stickler for rules, tried to calm him. "Bakugo, we must focus on the objective. We are the villains. Our role is to defend the weapon logically." "Shut up, Four Eyes. My objective is to crush Deku." Meanwhile, Deku and Uraraka stood at the building's entrance. "Bakugo's going to come straight for me," Deku predicted, a solemn look on his face. "He won't care about the bomb. He wants a fight. Then we'll have to be smarter," Uraraka declared, her determination unwavering. "What's your plan, Deku?" "My quirk isn't for head-on attacks," Deku explained, a plan already forming in his mind, drawing on his unique abilities. "It's about manipulation, disruption, and presence. We can't fight Bakugo's explosions directly. But I can make his movements sluggish, his targeting difficult. I can impose a domain of control over the environment." As they entered the building, an eerie silence settled over them. Bakugo was surprisingly patient, waiting. Then, a thunderous explosion rocked the hallway ahead. Bakugo, propelled by his blasts, burst through a wall, his face contorted with rage. "Deku, Uraraka, go for the bomb," Deku yelled, pushing her back as he stepped forward, meeting Bakugo's charge. Bakugo unleashed a powerful right hook, an explosion already building in his palm. But as he lunged, the air around Deku grew heavy, an oppressive weight that seemed to cling to Bakugo's limbs. The temperature plummeted, and a visible shimmer of cold distorted the air. "What the? It's so heavy," Bakugo roared, his movements noticeably slower, as if wading through unseen treacle. The explosion in his hand fizzled slightly, its intensity dampened by the sheer chill. "You're trying to freeze me, you creep." Deku didn't answer. He wasn't trying to freeze him, not exactly. He was making his presence felt, exerting a chilling, gravitational pull that made every one of Bakugo's movements require immense effort. He was establishing his grave dominion. Bakugo fought through the oppressive weight, firing off smaller, desperate explosions. Deku weaved, not dodging with speed, but with an almost ethereal fluidity, his trench coat a dark blur in the chilled air. He subtly influenced the trajectory of Bakugo's blasts, making them veer slightly off course, or caused the floor beneath Bakugo to feel unnaturally heavy, forcing him to plant his feet deeper, costing him precious milliseconds. "You can't escape me, Deku," Bakugo screamed, infuriated by the unseen resistance. "I'm not trying to escape, Kachan," Deku stated, his voice calm, an unsettling contrast to Bakugo's rage. I'm making you dance to my tune. He focused his quirk, not on a single point, but on the entire hallway. The shadows deepened, the chill intensified, making the very air thick and viscous. Bakugo found himself fighting not just Deku, but the environment itself, an unseen enemy that sapped his strength with every move. This was a battle where brute force was neutralized by an unseen, chilling will. This was the first true display of the grave dominion in combat, and the observers in the control room watched with bated breath. The fallout from the battle training resonated through Class 1A. Bakugo, still simmering with indignant rage, refused to even look at Deku, his usual explosive bluster deflated by the sheer, unquantifiable nature of Deku's grave dominion. The rest of the class, however, eyed Deku with a new mixture of awe and healthy respect. His quirk wasn't flashy, but it was undeniably effective, a silent, chilling force that had turned the volatile Bakugo into a struggling, frustrated mess. The next day, Aizawa, always a fan of practical experience, announced, "All right, problem children. Today, we're picking a class representative. Think carefully about who you want to lead. This isn't a popularity contest, it's about leadership potential." Almost immediately, Iida Tenya shot his hand up, waving it vigorously. "I propose we hold a democratic vote. This is the most equitable and fair way to determine the best leader for our class." Aizawa merely grunted, "Fine by me. Just make it quick." Ballots were passed around. Deku, surprisingly, found himself considering. He wasn't the most outwardly charismatic, nor the loudest. His strength lay in his quiet analysis and the unsettling power of his quirk. He knew Iida would be a good choice, organized and dedicated. But then, an idea sparked. What if the class needed someone who understood the unconventional, who could lead in the shadows as well as in the light? He thought of All Might's words, of the Undertaker's unwavering presence. He scribbled a name. The votes were tallied by Aizawa on the board. Iida. 3 Yayorozu. 2 Kaminari. 1. And then, unexpectedly, Midoriya. 15. A collective gasp swept through the room. Deku's eyes widened, completely stunned. He, Midoriya Izuku, had just been overwhelmingly elected class president. He stammered, trying to make sense of it. "Why me?" he asked, genuinely bewildered. Uraraka smiled brightly. "Well, during the battle training, you showed incredible calm under pressure, and your quirk is super strategic. You led without even realizing it, Deku." Kirishima nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, it was like you just controlled the whole fight. Plus, you're always thinking about everyone else." Even Bakugo, from his desk, grumbled a reluctant, he didn't just smash things. He made the whole damn room his bitch. It was as close to a compliment as Deku was ever likely to get from him. Aizawa sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, Midoriya, looks like you're the class rep. Try not to embarrass me too much." Deku felt a strange mix of profound responsibility and a creeping dread. He, the once quirkless boy, now held a position of leadership in the most prestigious hero school. It was an honor, but also a challenge that would force him even further out of his comfort zone. The lunchtime rush at UA was usually a vibrant, chaotic affair, but today, an unnerving silence fell over the main cafeteria. Deku, Uraraka, and Iida were discussing their upcoming hero training exercises when it happened. Suddenly, a loud, piercing alarm blared through the building, accompanied by a robotic voice echoing through the intercom system. "Security Level 3 breach. All students please evacuate the building immediately." This is not a drill. Panic erupted. Students, heroes in training with powerful quirks, immediately devolved into a screaming, pushing mob, stampeding towards the exits. Deku felt the familiar prickle of his grave dominion responding to the widespread fear, a wave of intense cold emanating from him, causing those closest to shiver involuntarily. "Everyone, remain calm." Iida's booming voice, propelled by his engine quirk, cut through the din. He shot off, a blue blur heading for the emergency exit, attempting to direct the panicked students. "Follow me." Orderly evacuation. But the sheer volume of students, coupled with the blind panic, made an orderly evacuation impossible. Students were crushing each other, pushing and shoving in a desperate scramble to escape. Deku, caught in the surge, felt himself being carried along, unable to move against the tide. He saw smaller students, even some with powerful quirks, getting trampled. Then, he saw it. Through a gap in the surging crowd, he glimpsed the source of the breach. It wasn't a villain. It was the press, swarming the main gate, somehow having broken through the outer security. Their faces were pressed against the windows, cameras flashing, desperate for a story. The security system, designed to detect villainous threats, had overreacted to a large, unauthorized civilian presence. The sight of the frantic students, coupled with the realization that it was a false alarm, solidified Deku's resolve. This wasn't a villain attack, but a moment of leadership. He couldn't let his classmates injure themselves in a mindless panic. Taking a deep breath, Deku focused his grave dominion like never before. He didn't scream or punch. He imposed his presence. A wave of profound, chilling stillness emanated from him, sweeping through the chaotic cafeteria. It wasn't physical force, but a psychological dampener, a sudden, almost overwhelming sense of quiet and solemnity that settled over the terrified students. The stampede, miraculously, began to slow. The screaming subsided into confused murmurs. Heads turned, searching for the source of the unnatural calm, the sudden, oppressive chill that seemed to demand attention. Seizing the moment, Deku channeled his voice, not by shouting, but by making it resonate with the amplified presence of his quirk, a low, unnerving echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Everyone, he projected, his voice carrying an unexpected weight, cutting through the residual panic. Look up, it's just the press. There is no threat. You are crushing each other. His words, combined with the chilling, almost supernatural stillness he had created, had an immediate effect. Students, jolted out of their panic by the strange atmosphere and Deku's resonant voice, looked up, saw the swarming reporters, and the collective realization dawned. The stampede halted, students slowly separating, embarrassment mixing with lingering fear. Iida, having finally cleared the emergency exit, looked back, his eyes wide with astonishment at the sight of the now orderly, albeit still tense, cafeteria. Deku stood in the center, his trench coat billowing slightly in the invisible currents of his quirk, a singular, quiet figure radiating an imposing, chilling calm. The alarm eventually ceased, replaced by the sounds of faculty members moving to disperse the press. Deku felt the adrenaline drain from him, leaving him trembling. He had just stopped a riot, not with a heroic punch, but with the pervasive, unsettling power of his grave dominion. He had been picked as class president, and in his first real test, he had brought an entire cafeteria of panicked hero students to a halt. The symbol of peace had guided him, but the shadow, it seemed, was truly his to command. The USJ, the unforeseen simulation joint, was a massive, domed facility designed to simulate various disaster scenarios for hero training. It was a chance for Class 1A to put their quirks to the test in a controlled environment, a welcome respite from the classroom drama and the lingering unease surrounding Deku's sudden leadership. As the class arrived, Aizawa, ever the pragmatist, gave a brief overview. 13. He gestured to the space hero specializing in rescue, will be overseeing the exercise. There are different zones, each simulating a different type of disaster. Use your quirks intelligently, and remember, teamwork is paramount. Deku, still adjusting to the weight of his unexpected presidency, felt a surge of anticipation. This was it, a chance to truly showcase his grave dominion in a practical scenario. He had spent the past few days honing his control, learning to manipulate the chilling presence of his quirk with even greater precision. He could now create localized pockets of extreme cold, induce subtle shifts in density, and even project a faint, almost imperceptible aura of unease, all without overtly affecting the environment. But as they entered the main dome, a chilling premonition washed over Deku, a sudden, visceral sense of wrongness. The lights flickered, and a swirling purple portal materialized in the center of the USJ, a dark vortex from which a horde of figures began to emerge. Those aren't part of the exercise, Aizawa muttered, his eyes narrowing. Those are villains. A tall, gaunt figure with a hand covering his face stepped forward, his voice raspy and menacing. We are the League of Villains, he announced, his gaze sweeping over the students. And we're here to kill All Might. The class erupted in a mixture of fear and adrenaline. This wasn't a simulation, this was a real attack. Aizawa immediately sprang into action, erasing the quirks of the approaching villains. 13. Protect the students. Midoriya, Iida, get to the main office and alert the staff. Iida, his engine quirk roaring, immediately took off, leaving a blue blur in his wake. Deku, however, hesitated. His gaze was drawn to a hulking, bird-like creature with an exposed brain, its eyes devoid of any intelligence. The figure exuded an unnatural aura of power, a chilling presence that rivaled even his own grave dominion. That Nomu, the hand-covered villain rasped, gesturing towards the creature. It's designed to kill All Might. Deku felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination to defend his mentor. But he also knew his limitations. He wasn't a powerhouse like All Might. His strength lay in control and manipulation. Uraraka, he said, his voice low and urgent. Go with 13. I'm going to try and buy them some time. Uraraka looked at him, her face etched with worry. Deku, that's insane. You can't fight them alone. I'm not going to fight them, Deku stated, his eyes hardening. I'm going to make them feel unwelcome. He stepped forward, his trench coat billowing slightly. The shadows in the USJ seemed to deepen, the air growing noticeably colder. He focused his grave dominion, not on a specific target, but on the entire central plaza. He wasn't going to attack, he was going to dominate the environment. A wave of profound, chilling unease washed over the villains. The temperature plummeted, a visible mist forming with each of Deku's breaths. The very air seemed to thicken, becoming heavy and oppressive. The lesser villains stumbled, their movements becoming sluggish, their bravado replaced by a growing sense of dread. What is this? One of them exclaimed, his voice trembling. It feels like death. The hand-covered villain, however, remained unfazed, his red eyes fixed on Deku. Interesting quirk, he rasped, his voice still calm. But it won't work on the Nomu. The hulking creature, seemingly unaffected by the chilling atmosphere, lumbered forward, its eyes locked on Aizawa. Deku knew he couldn't stop it directly. But he could influence it. He focused his grave dominion on the Nomu's immediate surroundings, creating pockets of extreme density, making the very air around it feel like a suffocating, gravitational pull. The Nomu, despite its immense strength, seemed to stumble, its movements becoming slightly less fluid, as if wading through an invisible, viscous fluid. It was a subtle effect, but every millisecond counted. Deku then projected a wave of pure, concentrated dread, an almost psychic assault that amplified the chilling atmosphere. It wasn't a physical attack, but a psychological one, designed to disrupt the Nomu's focus, to make it feel wrong. The Nomu paused, its head tilting slightly, as if sensing an alien presence. It was a fleeting moment of hesitation, but it was enough. Aizawa, taking advantage of the distraction, managed to erase the quirks of several surrounding villains, creating an opening for 13 to evacuate the students. Deku knew he couldn't hold them off forever. His grave dominion wasn't designed for direct combat against overwhelming force. But he had bought them time. He had used his chilling presence, his unique form of control, to turn the USJ into a spectral arena, a place where the villains felt unwelcome. And as All Might finally burst through the entrance, his booming laughter echoing through the now chilled dome, Deku knew that the true battle was about to begin. The shadow had paved the way for the symbol of peace. The aftermath of the USJ incident was a whirlwind. All Might, battered but victorious, had single-handedly driven off the main villains, while the other pro-heroes and students dealt with the remaining thugs. Deku, exhausted but resolute, had watched the symbol of peace fight, a silent, chilling guardian in the background, subtly hindering the Nomu and the other villains with his grave dominion when he could. His unique abilities had gone largely unnoticed by the wider public, overshadowed by All Might's raw power, but not by those who truly mattered. Later that day, back at UA, the faculty debriefing was a tense affair. Aizawa, his face still bruised, addressed Deku. Midoriya, your actions at the USJ were unconventional, but effective. You created crucial openings and disrupted enemy movements without directly engaging. It was reckless, but it showed quick thinking and a mastery of your quirk beyond your years. All Might, back in his gaunt form, placed a hand on Deku's shoulder. Young Midoriya, your courage shone brightest today. You understood that a hero doesn't always have to be the one to land the final blow. You controlled the field, allowing others to act. You truly embodied your grave dominion. Deku felt a rare blush warm his cheeks, a stark contrast to the lingering chill of his quirk. I knew I couldn't fight them like you, All Might. I had to use what I had. Aizawa just nodded, a hint of respect in his tired eyes. Exactly. You played to your strengths. Now, you've got a visitor. Someone who specifically asked to see you. Deku's brows furrowed in confusion. A visitor. Who would want to see him after such a chaotic day? He was led to a private lounge, a plush, dimly lit room typically reserved for faculty or high-profile guests. As he stepped inside, the air seemed to thicken, growing cold, not with the familiar chill of his own quirk, but with an older, deeper, more profound cold. And standing there, a towering, imposing figure cloaked in black, was a man whose image Deku had worshipped since childhood. He wore a long, black leather trench coat, a wide-brimmed hat casting shadows over his face, and his eyes, when they met Deku's, held an intensity that could stop a heart. His silver hair, long and unbound, framed a face that seemed carved from granite. This wasn't a cosplay, this was the real deal. This was Mark Calloway, the legendary Undertaker. Deku froze, his jaw slack. He was utterly speechless, unable to process the living legend standing before him. The original phenom, the source of his hero name, the inspiration for his entire persona. The Undertaker, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floor, finally spoke. Young Izuku Midoriya. Deku could only stammer, Mr. Calloway. The Undertaker. A flicker of something akin to a smile touched the corner of the legend's lips. I have heard tell of a young man, a hero in training at this esteemed academy, who wields a unique power. A power that resonates with the very essence of what I have long embodied. He took a slow step forward, his gaze piercing. They call your quirk, Grave Dominion. And I have seen the footage of your recent display at the USJ. Deku's heart pounded against his ribs. The Undertaker had seen him. The actual Undertaker. You do not fight with explosive force, nor with blinding speed, the Undertaker continued, his voice steady and deliberate. You command the very atmosphere. You bring a chilling presence that slows, that disorients, that instills a primal unease. You dominate the field, not by overwhelming, but by enveloping. He extended a gloved hand, a gesture of profound respect. Deku, still in shock, slowly reached out and clasped it. The grip was firm, powerful, and strangely warm, despite the chilling aura that seemed to emanate from the man. My path was not one of flashy heroics, but of an unwavering presence, a quiet menace that ensured my opponents always knew they were facing something inevitable, the Undertaker said, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper. You possess that same quality, young man. A true phenom. Your power is not to destroy, but to control the very fabric of despair, to turn fear into a weapon against the wicked. He paused, his eyes gleaming with a newfound purpose. This world of heroes, it needs more than just brute force. It needs those who can instill dread in the hearts of villains, those who can make the very ground tremble beneath their feet with their mere presence. You, Izuku Midoriya, have the potential to be such a hero. A hero who brings the chill of retribution to those who would prey on the innocent. The Undertaker of the next generation. Deku stared, tears welling in his eyes. To be acknowledged by his childhood hero, to have his unconventional quirk validated by the very legend it was based on, it was more than he could have ever dreamed. The weight of his grief, the burden of his strange power, suddenly felt a little lighter, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. I will, sir, Deku choked out, his voice thick with emotion. I will become that hero. The Undertaker nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Good. Then our paths may cross again, young phenom. For now, continue your training. Continue to cultivate that chilling dominion. For the bell tolls for evil, and you, young man, will be the one to hear its call. With that, he turned, and with a silent, imposing grace, he exited the lounge, leaving Deku alone in the profound, lingering chill of his presence. Deku stood there for a long moment, clutching his own trench coat, a newfound resolve burning within him. He was no longer just the boy who admired a wrestler. He was the chosen heir to a legacy, a hero who would bring the grave dominion to the world. The day after the USJ attack, the atmosphere at UA was still buzzing with a mixture of relief, trauma, and an undeniable undercurrent of excitement. The League of Villains had been repelled, but the encounter had starkly reminded everyone of the dangers lurking in the hero world. For Deku, the visit from the actual Undertaker had solidified his resolve, imbuing him with a quiet confidence that settled deep within his being. Aizawa, surprisingly, was back in class the very next day, albeit wrapped in bandages that made him look even more menacing. He surveyed the quiet room, his eyes scanning each student. "All right, problem children, I know you've all been through a lot. But the world doesn't stop for villains. We continue with your education. And that means, the UA Sports Festival is coming up." A collective gasp, then a surge of excited chatter, filled the room. The Sports Festival. It was more than just a school event. It was a nationally televised spectacle, a hero's proving ground, and a direct path to internships with top pros. "Hold your horses," Aizawa grumbled, his voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't just a popularity contest. This is your chance to show the world what you're made of. To prove you're not just survivors of a villain attack, but genuine heroes in training." He paused, his gaze lingering on Deku, then on Bakugo. "It's also a chance for pro heroes to scout talent, so take it seriously. It's your first step into the professional world." Deku felt a familiar knot of anxiety, but this time, it was mixed with a determined thrill. This was his stage. Unlike the entrance exam, where he had been an unknown, now he carried the weight of his class president title, the memory of his performance at the USJ, and the profound words of the Undertaker himself. Bakugo, predictably, was already seething with ambition. "Ha, as if any of you extras stand a chance against me. I'm gonna be number one, no matter what." His eyes, however, darted to Deku, a flicker of grudging respect and intense rivalry in their depths. The memory of the chilling, unseen pressure in the battle training still rankled him. Uraraka bounced in her seat, a hopeful gleam in her eyes. "This is it, Deku. Our chance to really shine." Iida chopped the air with his hand. "Indeed, we must train diligently and approach this with the utmost seriousness. It is a critical opportunity to demonstrate the caliber of UA." Deku nodded, a plan already beginning to form in his mind. His grave dominion wasn't suited for direct, flashy combat, but its subtle manipulations, its environmental control, and its ability to instill dread could be devastatingly effective in a competitive setting. He wouldn't just be fighting his opponents, he would be making the very ground they stood on, the air they breathed, and the space around them his domain. He thought of the Undertaker's grim determination, his tactical prowess in the ring, bending the fight to his will. The sports festival wouldn't be about just winning, it would be about presence. It would be about establishing his authority, his chilling dominion, over the entire arena. Aizawa continued, detailing the various stages of the festival, though the specifics were lost on Deku as his mind raced. He envisioned the obstacles, the one-on-one battles, and how his unique quirk could be applied. He could make the ground heavy for opponents in a race, or create pockets of extreme cold to slow their movements. In a one-on-one, he could envelop his foe in a chilling aura of dread, making their limbs heavy and their resolve waver. This wasn't just about becoming a hero. It was about defining what kind of hero he would be. The world would be watching, and he would show them that heroism didn't always come with a blinding light. Sometimes, it arrived with a profound, unsettling chill, a grave dominion that commanded respect, and perhaps, a little fear. The announcement of the sports festival ignited a firestorm of ambition within Class 1A. But for Deku, it was a call to an even deeper, more focused form of training. The words of the Undertaker echoed in his mind. "Control the very fabric of despair, turn fear into a weapon." This wasn't about raw power, it was about the insidious, pervasive might of his grave dominion. His training regimen, initially guided by All Might, now shifted, becoming a solitary, almost meditative pursuit. While his classmates sparred and practiced flashy super moves, Deku retreated to the quietest corners of the UA training grounds, often the unused, dimly lit sectors where his quirk felt most at home. His first focus was environmental manipulation. All Might had pushed him to move objects. Now, Deku aimed for a more subtle, constant effect. He spent hours in a sealed, mock-up urban zone, learning to systematically drop the temperature, not just in a localized burst, but across an entire area. He'd practice making the very air around a mock building dense and heavy, as if a localized pressure system had formed. This wasn't just about cold, it was about creating a pervasive, sapping force that would exhaust an opponent. He learned to distinguish between a casual chill and the bone-deep cold that spoke of the grave. Next was gravitational influence. This was trickier. He wasn't manipulating gravity itself, but rather creating pockets of increased or decreased density in the air and ground, giving the sensation of altered gravity. He'd practice making a short sprint feel like running uphill through mud, or conversely, making his own steps unnaturally light, allowing for quick, almost ghostly glides across surfaces. This would be invaluable in obstacle courses and races. The most challenging aspect was refining the psychological impact of his quirk. The natural dread his grave dominion inspired had been uncontrolled, a byproduct of his emotional state. Now, he sought to wield it with precision. He spent time in isolation, picturing scenarios, learning to project a focused aura of unease, not pure terror, but a creeping sense of vulnerability, a profound chill that settled not just on the skin, but in the mind. The Undertaker's presence had always been about psychological warfare, breaking an opponent's spirit before their body. Deku aimed for a similar effect, making his foes second-guess, hesitate, and feel the weight of his unseen influence. He also worked tirelessly on his physical conditioning, not for brute strength, but for endurance and agility. His quirk wasn't a quick burst, it was a sustained, draining effort. He needed to be able to maintain his localized dominion for extended periods, especially in potential one-on-one matches. He ran, sparred, and performed bodyweight exercises, his movements becoming fluid and economic, like a shadow dancing in the periphery. His trench coat, once just an homage, now felt like a part of him, a constant reminder of the persona he was cultivating. Unbeknownst to Deku, Aizawa often observed these training sessions from the shadows, his keen eyes analyzing every nuance of Deku's movements and the subtle shifts in the environment around him. He'd watch as Deku meticulously adjusted the temperature in a training room, creating a localized chill that seemed to seep into the very bones. He'd see him practice his gravitational manipulation, making objects feel unnaturally heavy or light with a mere gesture. And he'd feel the subtle, creeping unease that Deku projected, a chill that seemed to bypass the skin and settle directly into the mind. All Might would occasionally join these observations, his gaunt form hidden from view, a subtle nod of approval his only gesture. He understood that Deku's path was unique, and that conventional training wouldn't suffice. He saw the grim determination in Deku's eyes, the quiet focus that replaced the earlier anxiety. Aizawa, however, saw something more. He saw the potential for a powerful, unconventional hero, but also the inherent risks. His control is improving, Aizawa would mutter to All Might during these clandestine viewings, but that emotional intensity, it's a double-edged sword. He's channeling his grief, his fear, and that's making his quirk incredibly potent. But if he loses control, All Might would nod, his expression grave. That is a concern, but young Midoriya is learning to master his emotions, not suppress them. He understands that his power comes from that depth, but he's learning to wield it with precision, with purpose. Aizawa remained unconvinced, but he couldn't deny the results. Deku was becoming a force to be reckoned with, a hero unlike any he had seen before. He was a master of subtle manipulation, a chilling presence, and a tactician who could turn the very environment into a weapon. Deku also focused on his stealth and tactical thinking. He realized that being seen wasn't always an advantage for his quirk. He honed his ability to merge with shadows, to move silently, to appear and disappear within his own chilling aura, striking from the unseen with his pervasive influence. He became adept at identifying an opponent's weaknesses and tailoring his environmental manipulations to exploit them. As the sports festival drew closer, Deku felt a profound shift within himself. The raw grief he had carried for Inko still lingered, a deep reservoir of emotion, but he had learned to channel it, to sculpt it into a controlled, formidable power. He was no longer just the inheritor of a quirk, he was its master. He was ready to step onto the grand stage, not as All Might's successor in power, but as a different kind of hero entirely. The world would soon learn the meaning of grave dominion. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, vibrating through the massive stadium. The UA Sports Festival had begun. Deku stood with Class 1A in the tunnel, the air thick with anticipation, the sounds of thousands of cheering fans washing over them. His trench coat, a familiar comfort, felt like a battle standard now. His grave dominion hummed beneath his skin, a controlled, icy tremor. "Are you ready, audience?" Present Mike's voice boomed, making the stadium lights pulse. Get ready to witness the future of heroism. It's time for the first-year stage. And here they are, Class 1A. The tunnel opened, revealing a dazzling, sunlit arena. Cheers exploded as Class 1A, the USJ survivors, marched out. Bakugo swaggered, explosions crackling in his palms. Todoroki walked with his usual detached grace, a faint shimmer of ice around him. And then there was Deku, walking with a quiet, deliberate pace, his head held high. A subtle, almost imperceptible wave of cold preceded him, making a few of the audience members in the front row shiver despite the warm day. Midnight, the R-rated hero, dramatically announced the first event, the obstacle race. This race will test your quirks and your cunning. The course is 3 kilometers long, designed to push you to your limits. The first one to cross the finish line wins. Deku took a deep breath, his mind already calculating. This was his chance to show the world the true versatility of Grave Dominion. The starting gun fired, and the ground beneath Deku instantly churned as hundreds of students surged forward. Bakugo launched himself with explosions, Todoroki created an ice path, and others used their quirks in a frantic dash. Deku didn't explode or create flashy displays. Instead, he channeled his quirk into the immediate ground around him. A profound, localized increase in density made the earth under his feet feel incredibly solid, granting him unusual traction. He moved with a heavy, purposeful stride, but the true effect of his quirk was on those around him. As other students tried to push past him, they suddenly found their footing inexplicably heavier, their steps sinking slightly as if they were running through wet sand. A subtle, chilling aura emanated from Deku, weaving through the scrambling crowd, causing a prickle of unease that made some hesitate, a split-second delay in their dash. The first major obstacle appeared, a narrow tunnel teeming with deactivated zero-pointer robots from the entrance exam. Most students blasted or froze their way through. Deku, however, saw an opportunity. He focused his Grave Dominion on the very air within the tunnel, making it thick and oppressive. The robots, though deactivated, suddenly felt incredibly heavy, their metal parts groaning as if resisting an unseen gravitational pull. For the students trying to push past them, it was like wading through molasses, a slow, agonizing struggle against an invisible force. Deku, by contrast, made the air immediately around himself lighter, almost frictionless. He didn't run. He seemed to glide through the chilling, heavy corridor, his trench coat flowing behind him like a dark current. He passed dozens of struggling students, his method bewildering and effective. Next came the fall, a treacherous chasm connected by flimsy, isolated ropes. Many students hesitated, or tried to swing across. Bakugo blasted over it, Todoroki created an ice bridge. Deku approached the edge, he focused, extending his quirk into the very chasm. A chilling mist began to rise from the depths, clinging to the ropes and the very air. He then exerted a subtle, pervasive downward pressure, making the gap feel even deeper, more daunting to those behind him. For himself, he made the air under his boots incredibly dense, almost solid. He didn't swing. He walked across the ropes with an unnerving, deliberate step, his feet finding purchase on the subtly manipulated air, seemingly defying the fall below. The chilling aura that clung to him made the crossing feel like a descent into an ethereal void, emphasizing his control over the grave itself. The final stretch was a sprawling minefield. Explosions rocked the ground as students tried to navigate it. Bakugo, furious, was already far ahead, battling for the lead with Todoroki. Deku, however, once again used his quirk to establish dominion over the terrain. He sent out a focused wave of his cold presence, not to detonate the mines, but to influence their very triggers. He made some mines feel heavier, anchoring them. For others, he subtly dampened their explosive potential with localized cold, reducing their blast radius. He then moved through the field with an eerie precision, navigating the unseen dangers by sensing the weight and chilling aura of the unstable ground. He even created small pockets of chilling density that briefly unsettled Bakugo's footing as he flew over, causing him to lose precious moments. The audience, initially confused by Deku's non-flashy approach, was now captivated. He wasn't destroying, he was influencing. He wasn't overpowering, he was dominating. He was an unseen, chilling force, an architect of discomfort and unexpected resistance. As he neared the finish line, Bakugo and Todoroki were neck and neck. Deku, with a final, desperate surge of his grave dominion, focused a wave of oppressive cold and density directly in front of them, an invisible wall that slightly impeded their final surge. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it was enough to make them stumble, to force a split-second correction. Bakugo crossed the finish line first, followed immediately by Todoroki. But right behind them, emerging from the lingering cold and shadows he had commanded, was Deku, his trench coat fluttering, his face set with grim determination. He hadn't won, but he had undeniably made his presence felt. He had demonstrated that the Grave Dominion was a force to be reckoned with, a chilling testament to a hero forged in darkness. The sports festival had truly begun. The stadium hummed with excited chatter as midnight announced the next event, the cavalry battle. Teams of 2 to 4 would compete to steal headbands worth varying point values, with the first-place student's headband worth a staggering 10 million points. Deku felt the familiar prickle of anxiety, but also a strategic thrill. This wasn't just about individual power, it was about teamwork and synergy. His Grave Dominion could be incredibly effective in disrupting opponents, but he needed riders who could capitalize on his environmental control. As the frantic scramble for teams began, Deku found himself alone. Most students gravitated towards flashy quirks or established friendships. Then, a towering figure approached him. He was a powerfully built student with an intense, almost brooding gaze, and a shock of dark, spiky hair that seemed to stand on end. His hero costume, even in its basic gym uniform form, hinted at a darker aesthetic, a sleeveless top that revealed heavily muscled arms, and a general aura of quiet intensity. Midoriya, the student rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. My name is Asahi Yami. My quirk is Inferno Grip. Deku's eyes widened. Inferno Grip. He'd seen Asahi's performance in the quirk apprehension test. Asahi could generate intense heat, even localized flames, from his hands, often accompanied by a frighteningly strong grip. It was a quirk that projected power and destruction. I need a rider who can complement my quirk, Asahi continued, his dark eyes fixed on Deku. Your Grave Dominion is chillingly effective. The cold, the density, the unease. My heat, my destructive grip. We are opposites, but opposites can create a formidable force. He held out a large, calloused hand. What do you say, class president? A union of fire and ice? Or perhaps, brothers of destruction? Deku's mind raced. Asahi's raw power and direct combat style perfectly offset his own subtle manipulations. The contrast was striking. Heat and cold, destruction and dominion. It was like two sides of the same coin, echoing the destructive force of Kane and the chilling presence of the Undertaker. I think that's an excellent idea, Asahi-kun. Deku replied, shaking his hand, a strange sense of destiny settling over him. We'll need 2 more riders, preferably those with good mobility or defense. They quickly recruited Tokiyami Fumikage, whose dark shadow quirk offered both offense and defense, and Hagakure Toru, whose invisibility would be invaluable for stealth and reconnaissance. Deku became the team's horse, his Grave Dominion making his base surprisingly stable and difficult to move against. Let the games begin. Present Mike roared, and the stadium erupted into chaos. Deku immediately channeled his Grave Dominion. A pervasive chill spread from their team, a subtle warning to any who approached. He made the ground beneath his feet incredibly dense, rooting them like a gravestone, making it difficult for other teams to push or shove them. He then extended his quirk outwards, creating pockets of localized resistance around their chosen targets, subtly slowing them down. Their first target was a team with high mobility. As they darted in, Deku focused his chill, causing their leader to stumble, their footing becoming uncertain on the subtly manipulated ground. Asahi, perched on Deku's shoulders, immediately extended a hand, his Inferno Grip flaring. A wave of intense heat radiated outwards, melting the air and adding another layer of disorienting pressure to their opponents. Dark Shadow, disrupt their formation. Tokiyami commanded, and his shadowy familiar lashed out, its form growing larger and more aggressive in the darkened atmosphere Deku was maintaining around their team. Hagakure, meanwhile, darted around, acting as their scout, subtly relaying information on approaching teams and their headbands. Their strategy was brutal in its effectiveness. Deku created a zone of chilling deterrence, making opponents feel heavy, slow, and uneasy. Asahi then brought the raw, destructive force of his heat, making their attacks even more disorienting. Tokiyami provided both range defense and offensive bursts, while Hagakure was their eyes and ears. As Bakugo's team, spearheaded by his explosive power, barreled towards them, Deku felt a surge of cold determination. This was the match he knew was coming. "Deku, you're mine," Bakugo roared, launching himself with a massive explosion. Deku met his charge by extending his grave dominion in a focused wave. The air directly in Bakugo's path became impossibly dense, a wall of chilling pressure that slammed into him, robbing his explosions of some of their thrust. Bakugo's descent was jarring, his feet scraping the ground as he struggled against the invisible force. "You're fighting the very air, Kachan," Deku thought, channeling more power. He then made the ground under Bakugo's feet feel like quicksand, an unseen pull that anchored him momentarily. Asahi, seizing the opportunity, extended both hands, glowing with inferno grip. "Feel the burn, Bakugo," he bellowed, releasing a concentrated burst of intense heat that made the concrete sizzle and sent a wave of searing warmth towards Bakugo. Bakugo, caught between the chilling weight of Deku's quirk and the scorching heat of Asahi's, roared in frustration. His explosions became less controlled, more desperate. He was forced to focus on fighting the environment, not just his opponents. Their team, the chilling aura of Deku's grave dominion mingling with the searing heat of Asahi's inferno grip, became a force that commanded respect and instilled fear. They moved through the chaotic battleground with an unnerving, almost ritualistic rhythm, like two forces of nature, brothers bound by their opposing powers, laying waste to any who dared to challenge their spectral and fiery dominion. They weren't just fighting for points, they were making a statement. And the entire stadium was witnessing the chilling, fiery might of UA's new Brothers of Destruction. The cavalry battle had concluded, leaving a trail of disoriented students and stunned pro-heroes in its wake. Deku's team, the Brothers of Destruction, with Asahi, Tokiyami, and Hagakure, had secured a respectable third place, an undeniable testament to their unique synergy. The chilling presence of Deku's grave dominion, perfectly complemented by Asahi's searing inferno grip, had been a spectacle unlike any other. Now, the final round loomed, the one-on-one battles. The bracket was revealed, projected onto the massive screens in the stadium. Deku felt a familiar knot of apprehension as he saw his first opponent. The first match of the final round. Present Mike's voice roared, cutting through the stadium's buzz. It's the boy who brought a literal chill to the obstacle course, and whose subtle power defined the cavalry battle. From Class 1A, it's Midoriya Izuku. A wave of respectful applause, tinged with a slight shiver from the crowd, rippled through the stadium. Deku walked to the center of the ring, his trench coat swaying with each deliberate step, the ambient temperature around him subtly dropping. And facing him, Present Mike continued, building the suspense, a true powerhouse of the hero course. From Class 1B, a master of elemental control, capable of creating massive tidal waves of earth and rock. It's Tetsu, a burly student with a hardened, metallic skin quirk, strode into the arena, radiating confidence. He slammed his fists together, creating a metallic clang. "All right, Midoriya, I heard about your weird cold quirk, but I'm all about brute force. Let's see how your grave dominion handles a real punch." Deku remained silent, his gaze fixed on his opponent. He knew Tetsu's quirk, steel. It made his body as strong as steel, and he could generate immense earth-based attacks. A head-on fight was suicide. This would be a battle of attrition, of psychological warfare and environmental control. Start. Tetsu immediately charged, his metallic body gleaming, his every step shaking the ground. He raised a massive fist, intending to land a crushing blow. Deku didn't move. He closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep breath. He didn't meet power with power. He met it with dominion. As Tetsu entered Deku's personal space, a profound, chilling cold emanated from Deku, so intense it seemed to visibly mist the air around Tetsu's body. It wasn't just temperature. It was an unnatural, oppressive chill that seeped into his bones, causing his muscles to stiffen. At the same time, Deku focused his quirk to subtly increase the density of the air around Tetsu's limbs, making every swing feel like he was punching through thick water. What the? Tetsu grunted, his powerful charge faltering. His metallic skin, usually impervious, felt unnervingly cold, the chill seeping into his very core. His movements, usually fluid, became sluggish, as if he were underwater. Deku began to move, not offensively, but defensively, his trenchcoat a blur as he sidestepped Tetsu's now labored attacks. He wasn't relying on speed, but on making his opponent feel slow. He subtly manipulated the friction on the ground beneath Tetsu, making his footing less secure, causing him to stumble and regain his balance. Tetsu roared in frustration, trying to adapt. He stomped his foot, attempting to create an earth wave, but Deku focused his grave dominion on the ground itself. The earth beneath Tetsu suddenly felt incredibly heavy, resistant to his power, as if trying to pull him down. The tremor he generated was weak, barely rippling the surface. "You can't hit what you can't reach." Deku's voice, though calm, seemed to echo with a strange, chilling resonance in the arena. "You're fighting the very air you breathe, the ground you stand on." He continued his subtle assault, focusing a tight beam of concentrated cold directly at Tetsu's joints, making them ache and stiffen. He didn't freeze him solid, but induced a pervasive, bone-deep ache that sapped his stamina. He wrapped his opponent in an invisible shroud of dread, not true fear, but a nagging sense of futility, a feeling that every effort was an uphill battle. Tetsu, despite his incredible fortitude, began to visibly tire. His metallic skin was now covered in a thin layer of frost, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He swung wildly, desperate to land a blow, but Deku, the silent conductor of the environment, made him miss. The air around him seemed to twist, his balance constantly shifted by unseen forces. He was fighting a ghost, a chill that clung to him, a weight that pressed down. "I can't move." Tetsu finally gasped, collapsing to one knee, his metallic form trembling, not from cold, but from exhaustion and the overwhelming, unseen pressure. He looked up at Deku, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and grudging awe. "Tetsu is down," Present Mike screamed, his voice filled with a rare note of astonishment. Midoriya Izuku advances to the next round. The crowd, initially quiet during the unconventional fight, erupted in cheers, a mix of appreciation for Deku's tactical genius and a distinct awe for the chilling power he wielded. Deku stood in the ring, his trench coat still, the lingering chill of his grave dominion radiating outwards. He hadn't landed a single punch, not a single visible strike. He had simply made his opponent's world his domain. He had won by bringing his chilling presence to bear, and the sports festival had truly begun to witness the unsettling power of the Undertaker of Ua. The stadium was abuzz, the commentators dissecting Deku's unique victory over Tetsu. His reputation, already unconventional, now solidified as a hero who didn't fight with brute force, but with a chilling, psychological, and environmental mastery. The grave dominion was proving to be a truly unsettling quirk. For his second match, the bracket pitted Deku against Zero Honta, the tape hero. Zero, with his elbow-mounted tape dispensers, was known for his speed, agility, and ability to bind opponents. A direct, close-quarters confrontation would be inevitable. As Present Mike announced the match, Deku walked to the ring with a new confidence, a subtle shift in his posture. He wasn't just controlling his quirk now, he was embodying the very essence of his inspiration. The trench coat seemed to settle more naturally on his shoulders, his movements gaining a deliberate, almost ritualistic rhythm. Zero, seeing Deku's unusual presence, felt a subtle shiver despite himself. "All right, Midoriya, I've seen your tricks, but my tape's fast and strong. Let's see your grave dominion. Get out of this. Start." Zero immediately launched an array of tape from his elbows, a flurry of sticky white strands designed to immobilize Deku. Deku moved, not with frantic dodging, but with an eerie, controlled grace. He didn't just step aside. He subtly shifted the density of the air around the incoming tape, making it feel sluggish, heavier, causing its trajectory to waver just enough for him to fluidly glide past. He was an unseen force, dancing at the edges of reality. Zero, frustrated, pressed his attack, sending more tape, trying to ensnare Deku. "Stay still, you creepy ghost." Deku saw an opening. As Zero lunged, attempting to wrap him from close range, Deku focused his grave dominion into his right hand, not for a blast of cold, but to create a localized zone of immense, oppressive density. He locked onto Zero's outstretched arm. With a powerful, deliberate movement that seemed to come from deeper than just his muscles, Deku seized Zero's arm. It wasn't just a grip, it was a grip enhanced by the crushing weight of his quirk. Zero gasped, his eyes widening as his arm felt like it was being pulled into a black hole. Deku then used his free hand to grab Zero by the throat, a textbook chokeslam grip. A wave of intense, bone-chilling cold erupted from Deku, radiating from his hand on Zero's throat, forcing the air out of Zero's lungs, and making his body feel unnaturally heavy and stiff. Zero's eyes bulged, not just from the physical pressure, but from the sudden, profound sense of dread that accompanied the chilling touch. He was completely at Deku's mercy, suspended in a realm of cold, heavy air. With a grunt of exertion, Deku hoisted the struggling Zero high into the air, his muscles straining against the added weight of his quirk's density effect. The crowd gasped, a collective murmur rising as they watched the bizarre, unsettling display. It was a wrestling move, but imbued with a supernatural weight. Then, with a devastating, almost primal force, Deku slammed Zero down into the ring, the impact shaking the very ground. Zero landed with a sickening thud, momentarily stunned, the chilling aura clinging to him. Deku didn't pause. He quickly grabbed Zero's limp form, lifting him by the legs and hooking his arms, in preparation for his finisher. He focused every ounce of his grave dominion into the execution. The air around Zero became intensely heavy, the chill permeating his very being, making him an inert, dead weight. With a final, chilling surge of power, Deku spiked Zero headfirst into the canvas, a perfectly executed tombstone piledriver. The impact was less about physical force and more about the crushing weight of the grave dominion, making Zero hit the ground with an impossible, almost supernatural density. Zero lay unmoving, utterly defeated, the chill of Deku's quirk radiating from his prone form. "Zero is knocked out," Present Mike roared, his voice laced with bewildered excitement. "Midoriya Izuku wins. He advances to the semifinals." The stadium erupted in a mix of awe, shock, and a palpable sense of unease. Deku stood over his fallen opponent, his trench coat billowing, his expression unreadable. He hadn't just won, he had delivered a chilling, undeniable statement. The Undertaker of UA wasn't just a master of environmental manipulation, he was a force of spectral brutality, bringing the very essence of the grave into the ring. And the world had just witnessed his chilling debut. The stadium was abuzz after Deku's shocking display. The tombstone piledriver, imbued with the crushing density of his grave dominion, had left both Zero and the audience stunned. The commentators, usually boisterous, had struggled to find words, grappling with the unsettling fusion of wrestling showmanship and chilling quirk mastery. His classmates, a mixture of awe and apprehension, now saw him in an entirely new light. He wasn't just strategic, he was brutal, in a way they hadn't expected. "All right, hero fans," Present Mike's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs. "Get ready for the semifinals. And our first match. It's the phenom of Class 1A, the master of chilling dominion, Midoriya Izuku." Deku walked into the ring, his trench coat flowing, his gaze fixed straight ahead. The air around him was already beginning to cool, a familiar prelude to his presence. He felt the weight of expectation, the whispers about his dark quirk, but beneath it all, a cold, focused resolve. And facing him, the prince of frozen fury and blazing resolve. He's the son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. From Class 1A, it's Todoroki Shoto. A wave of anticipation swept through the crowd. Todoroki, with his iconic half-red, half-white hair, strode into the ring, his posture as impeccable and stoic as ever. He was a force of nature, wielding both ice and fire with devastating precision. His eyes, however, held a new glint of interest as he sized up Deku. He had seen the chilling power of grave dominion, and he recognized a formidable, unconventional threat. "Midoriya," Todoroki said, his voice flat, yet carrying an undercurrent of respect. "Your quirk is unsettling. I won't underestimate you." Deku simply nodded, the subtle chill around him intensifying. He knew this would be his toughest battle yet. Todoroki's control over his elements was absolute, his power immense. He couldn't rely on psychological tricks alone. This would be a true test of his grave dominion against raw elemental force. Start. Todoroki didn't hesitate. A massive wave of ice erupted from his right side, surging across the ring, aiming to engulf Deku. Deku reacted instantly. He didn't try to outrun the ice. Instead, he channeled his grave dominion into the ground directly in front of him. A profound, crushing density settled over the approaching ice, making it incredibly heavy, almost gelatinous. The leading edge of the ice wave slowed, becoming thick and sluggish, its momentum severely hampered. The cold emanating from Deku counteracted Todoroki's ice, creating a swirling mist where the two opposing forces met. "What?" Todoroki muttered, surprised by the unexpected resistance. His ice was usually unstoppable. Deku then extended his quirk further, making the ground beneath Todoroki's advancing left foot feel momentarily incredibly heavy, like quicksand, causing him to stumble. At the same time, a focused burst of chilling dread washed over Todoroki, not enough to paralyze, but to create a flicker of hesitation, a momentary lapse in his perfect concentration. Seizing the opening, Deku launched himself forward, not with a charge, but a low, fluid glide, his trench coat a blur. He moved like a ghost, seeming to appear within Todoroki's personal space before the elemental user could fully recover. Todoroki, surprised by Deku's unnerving approach, instinctively retaliated with a blast of fire from his left side. But Deku was already ready. He channeled a concentrated beam of intense cold from his outstretched hand directly at the fire. It wasn't enough to extinguish the flames, but the clash of extreme temperatures created a disorienting thermal shock, a sudden, violent updraft of steam and superheated air that obscured Todoroki's vision and created a temporary, chaotic whirlwind. "He's creating chaos with his presence," Present Mike shouted, his voice ringing with excitement. "He's not fighting power with power, he's fighting stability with instability." Deku pressed his advantage, using the lingering steam as cover. He focused his quirk on Todoroki's body, attempting to replicate the bone-deep chill that had affected Tetsu. Todoroki, however, was more resilient. He wrapped himself in a protective layer of ice, shrugging off the general chill. "Your cold won't work on me, Midoriya," Todoroki declared, breaking through the steam, his face grim. "I control ice." "Perhaps," Deku replied, his voice calm, "but can you control the weight of the world?" With a surge of effort, Deku poured more of his grave dominion into the ground around Todoroki. It wasn't a localized heavy point. It was a broad, pervasive increase in density, making the very ring beneath Todoroki feel like it was sinking, pulling him down. Todoroki's footing became sluggish, his movements ponderous as he fought against the invisible, growing pressure. He tried to unleash another ice attack, but his footing was compromised. He stumbled, giving Deku another precious opening. This wasn't about a single move, it was a sustained, draining assault on Todoroki's control and stamina. Todoroki, gritting his teeth, unleashed a powerful burst of fire, incinerating the heavy air around him, desperate to break free of Deku's pervasive influence. The clash of ice, fire, and Deku's chilling dominion turned the ring into a maelstrom of elemental and spectral energy. Deku knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His quirk, while powerful, was draining. He needed to end it. He focused his remaining energy, not on another wrestling move, but on a final, overwhelming surge of grave dominion. He projected an intense, crushing wave of cold and density directly at Todoroki, an unseen force that aimed to momentarily immobilize him. At the same time, he unleashed a powerful, focused aura of dread, a chilling psychological blow designed to completely overwhelm his opponent's senses. Todoroki, caught off guard by the sheer intensity of the combined assault, gasped. His elemental powers flickered, his body momentarily stiffening as the crushing weight and profound chill of Deku's quirk settled upon him. He instinctively tried to push back with both fire and ice, but for a split second, his immense power faltered under the unexpected, overwhelming dominion. Todoroki, all might, watching from the stands, leaned forward, a grim look on his face. He knew the potential of Deku's quirk. In that single, critical moment of hesitation, Deku moved. He didn't attack. He stepped forward, his trench coat billowing, and simply placed his hand on Todoroki's shoulder, a clear sign of surrender if this were a villain encounter. "Todoroki is incapacitated by Midoriya's quirk," the referee declared, though Todoroki wasn't unconscious, just utterly overwhelmed. "Midoriya Izuku wins. He advances to the finals." The stadium was silent for a moment, then erupted in a thunderous roar. Deku stood over a gasping, bewildered Todoroki, the lingering chill of his grave dominion a testament to his victory. He had defeated one of UA's strongest, not with a single devastating blow, but by imposing his will, by turning the very battlefield into his chilling domain. The Undertaker of UA was proving to be an unstoppable, unsettling force. The stadium crackled with an almost unbearable tension. Deku's victory over Todoroki, achieved not through brute force but through a masterful, pervasive application of his grave dominion, had sent shockwaves through the sports festival. The crowd, the pro-heroes, and even the other students were now fully aware of the chilling, insidious power Deku wielded. He was unpredictable, unsettling, and undeniably effective. All right, listeners, the moment you've all been waiting for. Present Mike's voice reached a fever pitch. The grand finale, the clash of colossal powers. In the right corner, the explosive Prince of Destruction, from Class 1A, it's Bakugo Katsuki. A deafening roar erupted as Bakugo stormed into the ring, explosions crackling menacingly in his palms. His face was a mask of furious determination, his eyes locked onto Deku. This wasn't just a tournament final for him, it was the culmination of years of rivalry, a chance to definitively prove his superiority over the quirkless Deku, who now possessed a power he still couldn't fully comprehend. And in the left corner, the mysterious phenom whose chilling power dominates the very air. Also from Class 1A, it's Midoriya Izuku. Deku walked to the center of the ring, his trench coat swaying with a quiet dignity. The atmosphere around him was already beginning to cool, a subtle but palpable shift that made the very air seem heavy. He met Bakugo's furious gaze with a calm, unwavering stare. He had come too far, lost too much, to back down now. The spirit of the Undertaker, of unwavering resolve in the face of chaos, settled over him. Start. Bakugo didn't wait. He launched himself with a colossal explosion, propelling himself across the ring in a flash. He wasn't holding back. Deku, I'm gonna obliterate you. Deku stood his ground, a calm within the storm. As Bakugo closed the distance, Deku unleashed a powerful, focused wave of his grave dominion. The air directly in Bakugo's path solidified into an incredibly dense, chilling barrier. Bakugo slammed into it, his momentum instantly arrested, his massive explosion dampened and diffused by the sheer oppressive force. He felt as though he had hit an invisible wall made of lead and ice. What the? Bakugo roared, fighting against the unseen resistance. His rage fueled more explosions, but each one felt less effective, absorbed by the heavy, cold air. Deku began to move, gliding with an unnerving grace. He used his quirk to subtly increase the friction on the ground beneath Bakugo's feet, making his movements clumsy, less fluid. He wove around Bakugo's flailing blasts, an elusive shadow in the explosive chaos. Bakugo, seething with frustration, decided on a different tactic. He unleashed a series of rapid, smaller explosions, trying to create a smokescreen and flank Deku. But Deku simply extended his chilling presence, dispersing the smoke almost immediately, revealing Bakugo's movements. He then made Bakugo's limbs feel heavy, as if he were trying to punch through water, making his powerful blows agonizingly slow. You can't hide from me, Deku. And you can't beat me without hitting me. Bakugo screamed, furious at the intangible enemy. I don't need to hit you, Kachan, Deku replied, his voice calm and resonating with the subtle power of his quirk. I just need to control the space you're in. He continued to push his grave dominion, pouring his focus into creating a pocket of profound, chilling dread around Bakugo. It was a psychological weapon, making Bakugo's heart race, his mind fill with a disquieting sense of dread, disrupting his concentration. Bakugo began to sweat, not just from exertion, but from an almost primal fear he couldn't explain. Stop it, you creep. Get out of my head. Bakugo bellowed, clutching his temples. His explosions became erratic, less precise. Deku saw his chance. He intensified the environmental manipulation, making the air around Bakugo so dense and cold that his explosions were severely weakened, almost fizzling out before they reached Deku. He then closed the distance, his movements precise and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Bakugo, hampered by the crushing air, the numbing cold, and the disorienting dread, struggled to unleash a final, desperate blast. But before he could fully charge it, Deku seized his arm, his grip imbued with the intense density of his quirk. "The time has come, Kachan," Deku stated, his voice low and solemn, echoing with an almost supernatural resonance. With a powerful, almost effortless lift, he hoisted the struggling Bakugo high overhead, in a perfect last-ride powerbomb. Bakugo, stiff and heavy from Deku's quirk, could do little but gasp for air as he was held suspended, utterly at the mercy of the Grave Dominion. With a final, chilling surge of power, Deku slammed Bakugo down into the canvas with crushing force. The impact vibrated through the stadium, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of an unseen monument. Bakugo lay prone, dazed, his body shuddering from the residual chill and the sheer physical and psychological strain. Deku stood over him, his trench coat a dark silhouette against the stadium lights. He didn't gloat, didn't cheer. He simply raised his hand, the chilling aura around him pulsing with silent triumph, a clear signal of his victory. "Bakugo Katsuki is knocked out." Present Mike roared, his voice laced with pure astonishment. "The winner of the UA Sports Festival, first-year division, is Midoriya Izuku." The stadium erupted in a thunderous, almost disbelieving roar. Deku had done it. He had defeated the seemingly unbeatable Bakugo, not by out-exploding him, but by outthinking him, by outmaneuvering him, and by imposing his grave dominion over every inch of the battlefield. The Undertaker of UA had claimed his first major victory, and the world now knew that true power sometimes lay not in the flash and fury, but in the unsettling, pervasive chill of the grave. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a pulsating wave of sound that washed over Deku as he stood on the highest podium. The confetti, a vibrant cascade of color, rained down, momentarily obscuring the dazzling stadium lights. He clutched his gold medal, the cool metal a stark contrast to the lingering warmth in his chest from the roar of the victory. He, Izuku Midoriya, the former quirkless kid, the one with the creepy quirk, was the UA Sports Festival champion. Beside him, Bakugo stood on the second-place podium, his face a thundercloud of barely contained fury and resentment. Todoroki, in third, maintained his usual stoic composure, though his eyes held a contemplative glint as he looked at Deku. "And now," Present Mike's voice boomed, somehow cutting through the cheers, "it's time for our special guests to present the medals. Please welcome two living legends, the original brothers of destruction, The Undertaker and Kane." The stadium lights dimmed, plunging the arena into a dramatic semi-darkness. From the entrance tunnel, a low, ominous gong resonated, sending shivers through the crowd. Then, a column of fire erupted on either side of the tunnel, and through the flickering flames, two imposing figures emerged. First, The Undertaker, in his signature long, black trench coat and wide-brimmed hat, walked with that unmistakable, deliberate stride, his presence alone commanding silence. Beside him, towering and equally imposing, was Kane, his red and black attire stark against his pale, almost ghostly features, a silent, powerful force of destruction. A collective gasp swept through the stadium, followed by a roar of stunned recognition and awe. Pro-heroes in the observation booth leaned forward, even Endeavor looking momentarily surprised. This was unprecedented. The two legends ascended the podium steps with an air of profound authority. The Undertaker first approached Todoroki, placing the bronze medal around his neck. "You possess formidable power, young man," his deep, gravelly voice rumbled, amplified for the entire stadium to hear. "But true mastery comes from embracing all of yourself. Do not let shadows dictate your light." Next, Kane approached Bakugo, his silent, intense gaze fixed on the explosive hero in training. He placed the silver medal around Bakugo's neck, his large hand resting for a moment on the boy's shoulder. "Raw power," Kane's voice, deeper and more guttural than his brother's, echoed, "can be blinding. Learn to control the fire, lest it consume you." Bakugo, surprisingly, just gritted his teeth, meeting Kane's gaze, momentarily subdued by the immense presence. Then, it was Deku's turn. The Undertaker, his face obscured by the brim of his hat, approached the highest podium. The air around Deku seemed to grow colder, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the two phenoms' combined presence. Deku's heart pounded, a mixture of overwhelming emotion and intense reverence. The Undertaker slowly extended his hand, holding the gold medal. As he placed it around Deku's neck, their eyes met. Deku saw a flicker of profound acknowledgement, even pride, in the legendary deadman's gaze. "Izuku Midoriya," the Undertaker's voice resonated through the stadium, carrying a solemn weight. You faced the storm, not with a greater tempest, but by calming its very winds. You brought the chill of the grave, not for death, but for dominion. You have shown the world that true power lies in control, in presence, and in the unwavering will to stand against what is wrong. He then did something unexpected. He placed his large, gloved hand on Deku's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect and endorsement. The legacy I forged, it was a path of unparalleled presence. You carry that flame, young phenom. You have truly earned your grave dominion. Then, Kane, the big red machine, stepped forward. He looked at Deku, his usually stoic expression softening almost imperceptibly. He raised his massive hand, and instead of a handshake, he simply laid it on Deku's head, giving a powerful, almost blessing-like pat. The chains of destiny, they await you, young one. Embrace your path. The crowd erupted in a thunderous ovation. The image of the original Brothers of Destruction standing with Deku, the new Undertaker of UA, was iconic. It wasn't just a sports festival victory, it was a passing of the torch, a symbolic anointing of the next generation's chilling force. Deku stood there, the gold medal heavy around his neck, the words of the legends echoing in his mind. He was the champion, he was the class president, and now, he carried the profound endorsement of his ultimate heroes. The path ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: the world would know the name Izuku Midoriya, the hero who commanded the grave dominion, the hero who walked in the footsteps of giants. The sports festival was over, but its ripples continued to spread throughout UA. Deku's victory, especially his unconventional and dominating use of grave dominion against Bakugo and Todoroki, had elevated him from a promising but mysterious student to a recognized force. The public, initially bewildered by his spooky quirk, was now intrigued, and the pro-hero world had taken notice in a profound way, especially after the unprecedented appearance and endorsement of The Undertaker and Kane. The Monday morning after the festival felt different. The air in Class 1A, usually a mix of youthful energy and Bakugo's constant grumbling, now carried a weight of anticipation. Everyone knew what was coming next. Aizawa, looking slightly less bandaged, though no less tired, walked into the classroom. "All right, problem children," he began, his gaze sweeping over them. "You've all had your chance to shine at the sports festival. The pro-heroes have been watching. And now, it's time for the hero internships." A collective murmur of excitement rippled through the room. Internships were the first real taste of the professional hero world, a chance to work alongside established pros and gain invaluable experience. "This isn't a mandatory part of the curriculum," Aizawa continued, "but it's highly recommended. It's where you start building your network, gaining practical experience, and seeing how the hero industry truly operates." He then flicked a switch, and the large screen behind him lit up, displaying a list of names and numbers. "These are the hero agencies that have extended offers to you, based on your performance at the festival," Aizawa explained. "The more offers you received, the higher you ranked in the pros' eyes." The screen was filled with a dizzying array of hero names and agencies. Deku scanned the list, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation. He knew he'd get some offers, especially after his sports festival performance, but the sheer number of offers he'd seen for Todoroki and Bakugo in the past had always felt unreachable. His eyes landed on his name, Midoriya Izuku, and next to it, a number that made his breath catch in his throat. Offers. 5,400. A gasp went through the room. Deku's number dwarfed even Todoroki's impressive count. Bakugo, seeing the figure, slammed his fist on his desk, a growl rumbling in his throat, but even he couldn't deny the shocking reality of the numbers. 5,400, Kaminari blurted out, stunned. "Midoriya, you broke the scale." Uraraka cheered, "That's amazing, Deku." Iida chopped the air, an astounding display of professional interest. "Midoriya-kun, your unique approach to heroism has clearly resonated." Aizawa nodded, a rare hint of a smirk on his face. "Indeed, Midoriya, your unique quirk and the way you utilized it, coupled with the, shall we say, high-profile endorsement you received, made you a significant point of interest. Most agencies want to see exactly how your grave dominion translates to real-world heroics." Deku felt a profound mix of elation and trepidation. So many offers, so many eyes on him. The world was now watching, not just to see if he could become a hero, but to see what kind of hero the Undertaker of Ua would truly be. The screen then shifted, showing a selection of prominent agencies that had extended invitations. Deku's eyes scanned them. Sir Night-Eye Agency offers to observe future potential, highly selective. Crust Agency renowned for defensive and protective heroics. Yukyu Agency focus on large-scale rescue and disaster relief. And then, at the very bottom, highlighted in a bold, almost ominous font, Dark Side Collective, exclusive invitation. Inquire for details. Deku's brow furrowed. Dark Side Collective, he murmured aloud. It wasn't a hero agency he recognized, nor was it publicly listed among the top-tier hero companies. It sounded different, intriguing, and undeniably linked to the shadowy, unconventional nature of his own quirk and inspirations. He looked at Aizawa, a question in his eyes. Aizawa simply gave him a long, appraising look. "Midoriya," he said, his voice flat, "you have a week to make your choices. Choose wisely. This internship could define your entire career. Or at least, the next step in it." The class dispersed into a flurry of excited conversations about their own offers, but Deku remained lost in thought. Thousands of choices, and one, mysterious, almost foreboding invitation that called to the very core of his grave dominion. The next phase of his journey had begun, and it promised to be as unpredictable and chilling as his quirk itself. The internship offers were the talk of the class, but the buzz truly peaked when Aizawa announced the next crucial step: hero names. "All right, problem children," Aizawa grumbled, holding up a stack of whiteboards. "This is it, your hero names. This is how the public will identify you, how villains will fear you, and how agencies will remember you. Choose wisely. This isn't just a nickname, it's your professional identity." Deku felt a flutter of nerves mixed with a profound sense of purpose. He had thought about this moment for years, ever since he was a small boy, imagining himself as a hero. Now, with the weight of his sports festival victory and the Undertaker's personal endorsement, the choice was clearer than ever. One by one, his classmates stepped up. Bakugo, predictable as ever, tried to submit King Explosion Murder, which was immediately shot down by Midnight, who was overseeing the process with her usual flair. Kirishima chose Red Riot, a nod to his hardening quirk and his admiration for the hero Crimson Riot. Uraraka, after some thought, settled on Uravity, a charming reflection of her quirk. Finally, it was Deku's turn. He walked to the front of the class, the subtle chill of his grave dominion emanating from him. He gripped the marker, taking a deep breath. He saw his classmates watching, some curious, some still wary of his powerful, unsettling quirk. He wrote 3 bold characters on the whiteboard: G. Undertaker, the Undertaker. A collective gasp went through the room, quickly followed by murmurs. It was bold, definitive, and perfectly encapsulated the chilling, dominating presence he had displayed. Midnight clapped her hands, her eyes gleaming. "Ooh, Midoriya-kun, the Undertaker. That's certainly impactful, and very on brand with your grave dominion quirk. Are you sure about this? It's quite the statement." Deku met her gaze, his own eyes holding a newfound resolve. "Yes, Sensei. It's the name that has always inspired me. He represents an unwavering force against evil, a presence that brings dread to those who deserve it. It embodies my quirk, and the kind of hero I want to be. I want to bring the grave to villains." Aizawa, leaning against the wall, gave a barely perceptible nod of approval. He had witnessed Deku's transformation, from a nervous, self-doubting student to a confident, albeit dark, force. The name fit. Bakugo scoffed, but there was a hint of something else in his glare: respect, perhaps, grudgingly given. Figures the damn freak would pick a creepy name like that. Iida chopped the air. A highly memorable and distinctive hero name, Midoriya-kun. It certainly conveys a powerful image. With his hero name chosen, the final piece of the puzzle for internships fell into place. Deku now had to choose from the overwhelming number of offers. He sifted through the digital proposals, seeing familiar hero names and impressive agencies, but his gaze kept returning to one peculiar invitation: Dark Side Collective, exclusive invitation. Inquire for details. He knew it was a risk. This wasn't a well-known agency, nor was it outwardly flashy. But the name resonated with him, a call to the darker, more unconventional path his quirk had carved for him. It felt like an extension of the very legacy he had just officially embraced. Later that day, Deku sat in an empty classroom, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had narrowed it down to two choices: an offer from Crust Agency, a highly reputable hero known for his defensive capabilities and strong public image, or the enigmatic Darkside Collective. Crust would provide a stable, conventional path, teaching him how to use his quirk in traditional hero work. It was safe, reputable. But the Darkside Collective, it promised something more, something tailored to the unique, unsettling nature of his power. It felt like the Undertaker's final blessing, a guiding hand towards a destiny he was only just beginning to comprehend. He closed his eyes, picturing the iconic, stoic face of the Undertaker, his low, resonant voice echoing, "Control the very fabric of despair, turn fear into a weapon." The choice, for Izuku Midoriya, now the Undertaker, was clear. The decision weighed heavily on Deku, or rather, on the Undertaker. The traditional path was clear. Agencies like Crust's offered a conventional, publicly approved trajectory into heroism. It was safe, reputable, and would undoubtedly hone his quirk in practical, if predictable, ways. But the Darkside Collective was a whispered mystery, an exclusive invitation that spoke directly to the unconventional heart of his grave dominion. He spent the evening poring over the limited information he could find. There was no public website, no flashy hero profiles. Just a P.O. box address and a single, cryptic sentence: "Where the unseen forces of justice are forged." It was an agency that operated outside the glare of public scrutiny, hinting at specialized work. The sheer secrecy, rather than deterring him, drew him in. It felt like an extension of the very ethos he was cultivating, a hero who worked in the shadows, a presence that was felt more than seen. He thought back to the words of the original Undertaker: "You bring the chill of retribution to those who would prey on the innocent." And Kane's silent, powerful nod. They weren't heroes of the daylight, but forces of an undeniable, grim justice. If his quirk was the grave dominion, then perhaps this Darkside Collective was where he could truly understand its depths. The next morning, as Aizawa collected their internship choices, Deku felt a quiet certainty. While most of his classmates proudly announced their placements with well-known agencies, Deku, when his turn came, simply stated, "I've chosen the Darkside Collective, sensei." A ripple went through the class. Even Aizawa's tired eyes seemed to widen fractionally. Bakugo grunted, a mix of contempt and grudging curiosity on his face. "The Darkside Collective," Iida repeated, adjusting his glasses. "Midoriya-kun, that agency is not widely known. Are you certain of your choice?" "I am, Iida-kun," Deku, now the Undertaker, replied, his voice firm. "I believe it's where I can best understand and develop my quirk." Aizawa simply nodded, a thin smile playing on his lips. "Very well, Midoriya. A bold choice. I wish you luck. Be prepared for anything." The address for the Darkside Collective led Deku to a nondescript industrial building on the outskirts of Musudafu, far from the gleaming skyscrapers of hero agencies. It was clad in dark, unadorned metal, with no flashy logo, no hero emblazoned signs, just a single, heavy steel door. It felt less like a hero agency and more like a tomb. He paused, a shiver running down his spine that wasn't entirely from his quirk. This was it, the leap into the unknown. He pushed the heavy door open, stepping into a dimly lit, vast reception area. The air was cool, almost stagnant, and a faint, metallic tang hung in the air. The only light came from a single, low-hanging bare bulb, casting long, dancing shadows. From the deepest part of the shadows, a figure emerged. Tall, gaunt, and clad in a simple, dark hooded robe that obscured most of his features. His voice, when it came, was a dry, raspy whisper that seemed to echo from the very walls. "Welcome, young Midoriya," the figure rasped, "or should I say, the Undertaker." Deku felt the hair on his arms stand up. The figure knew his hero name, a name he had only officially claimed yesterday. "I am the director of the Darkside Collective," the figure continued, his face still shrouded. "We operate in the shadows, dealing with threats that the heroes of the daylight cannot, or will not, touch. Our methods are unconventional. Our operatives are specialized, and your quirk, Grave Dominion, is precisely what we seek." The director took another step forward, and Deku could just make out piercing, glowing eyes from within the cowl. You possess the ability to command the very essence of dread, to warp the environment with your presence, to bring a chilling inevitability to those who oppose justice. You are a unique key to a realm of heroics few understand. Your training here will be unlike anything you've experienced at UA, the director stated, his voice gaining a chilling intensity. We will push the limits of your grave dominion, not just in combat, but in reconnaissance, in interrogation, in psychological warfare. We will teach you to become the fear in the dark, the chilling hand of justice that grasps even the most elusive villains. He extended a pale, bony hand, beckoning Deku further into the gloom. Come, the Undertaker. Your internship begins now. Let us descend into the shadows, and forge your true dominion. Deku took a deep breath, the subtle chill of his own quirk mingling with the pervasive cold of the mysterious agency. He stepped forward, leaving the remnants of his UA school days behind, and walked deeper into the chilling embrace of the Darkside Collective. His journey as the Undertaker had truly begun. Deku's internship at the Darkside Collective was unlike anything he could have imagined. There were no flashy patrols, no public appearances. Instead, his training focused on developing his grave dominion in ways UA hadn't even touched upon. He spent hours in pitch-black, soundproofed rooms, learning to perceive the world through the subtle shifts in temperature and density, extending his senses through his quirk. He honed his ability to manipulate specific emotions, projecting concentrated auras of unease or even fleeting panic, designed to disorient and subdue, rather than merely chill. His mentor, the hooded director, taught him about operating in the gray areas of heroism, where direct confrontation wasn't always the answer. They studied crime scenes, not for villains to fight, but for traces of lingering emotional despair, learning to use Deku's quirk to discern residual fear, a psychic fingerprint of villainous acts. He practiced cloaking, making himself subtly imperceptible by bending light and sound through localized air density and temperature manipulation, allowing him to pass unnoticed. This was heroism from the shadows, a chilling, psychological warfare. Then, the news broke. The hero killer, Stain, had made his move in Hosu City, paralyzing multiple pro-heroes. The images on the news were grim, showing incapacitated heroes, their bodies contorted. Among them, critically injured, was Iida Tenya's older brother, Ingenium. A cold dread gripped Deku, but it wasn't from his quirk. It was pure, unadulterated fear for his friend. He knew Iida admired his brother deeply, and a revenge mission was a dangerous, likely fatal, path for him. The hero killer is a formidable opponent, the director rasped during their next training session, his voice devoid of emotion. He is precise, ruthless, and his quirk paralyses his victims upon ingesting their blood. Conventional heroes struggle against him. Deku felt a surge of desperation. He had to do something. He pulled out his phone, seeing multiple messages from Uraraka, and then a single, chilling text from Iida. I found him. Hosu. Alleyway. A cold certainty settled over Deku. Iida was going for Stain. Alone. Director, Deku said, his voice firm, I need to go to Hosu. My friend is in danger. The director was silent for a moment, his glowing eyes fixed on Deku from within his cowl. Your training here has been specific, young Undertaker. Are you prepared to apply it in a true, unforeseen crisis? Not just as a hero, but as a force to turn the tide in the shadows. Deku met his gaze, the chill of his own quirk flaring. Yes, I have to. He's my friend. Very well, the director rasped, a subtle nod. Go, but remember your training. Do not engage in a head-on battle you cannot win. You are the shadow that binds, the chill that consumes. Use your dominion to disrupt, to disable, to create openings. Show them the true might of the unseen. The chilling rescue. Hosu City was a nightmare of fire and chaos. Nomu, unleashed by the League of Villains as a distraction for Stain, rampaged through the streets. Deku arrived, cloaked by his subtle grave dominion, making himself almost imperceptible as he navigated the burning alleys. The air was thick with smoke and the screams of civilians. He found the alleyway mentioned in Iida's message. The scene was grim. Stain, a terrifying figure with blades strapped to his body, stood over a paralyzed native, a pro-hero, and a desperate, enraged Iida, whose engines were sputtering, clearly already affected by Stain's quirk. Iida was screaming, driven by a raw thirst for vengeance, completely outmatched. Deku didn't hesitate. He knew he couldn't beat Stain in a direct fight. His quirk wasn't for overwhelming force. It was for control, for dominion. As Stain lunged at Iida, Deku focused his grave dominion with pinpoint precision. He didn't just drop the temperature. He created an intense, localized cold directly around Stain's legs and sword arm, causing his muscles to instantly stiffen, his movements to become sluggish, as if wading through unseen ice. At the same time, he projected a concentrated wave of profound dread, a chilling psychological assault that made Stain hesitate, a flicker of surprise in his normally cold eyes. Stain, slowed and momentarily disoriented, barely managed to deflect Iida's desperate kick. "What is this, cold?" he snarled, looking around, sensing the unseen force. Deku didn't reveal himself. He remained cloaked in his subtle invisibility, flowing through the shadows of the alley. He continued his attack, making the ground beneath Stain's feet feel subtly unstable, shifting, causing him to lose balance. He made the air in front of Stain's eyes ripple with distorting cold, affecting his vision. It was a relentless, pervasive assault that didn't physically harm, but thoroughly incapacitated. Just then, Todoroki burst into the alley, having tracked Iida. He immediately unleashed a massive ice attack. "Todoroki," Deku mentally cursed. While helpful, it also put him in a direct, flashy confrontation, not ideal for his subtle tactics. "Midoriya, you're here too," Todoroki exclaimed, seeing Iida and Native paralyzed. "He's the hero killer. His quirk paralyzes with blood." Deku projected his voice, a low, resonant whisper that seemed to come from the very shadows around them, audible only to Todoroki and Iida. "He needs to ingest it. I'm creating openings. Don't let him get your blood." Stain, now fighting two visible opponents and an unseen, chilling presence, was clearly frustrated. He was a master of his craft, but Deku's grave dominion was completely outside his experience. He found his blades swinging slower, his feet slipping, and a persistent, unnerving chill seeping into his very being, making him question his every move. Deku focused on Stain's limbs, making them heavy, causing his attacks to land with less force. He made the air around Stain's throat tighten, causing him to cough, disrupting his breathing. This wasn't a fight, it was a slow, chilling suffocation of Stain's control. The combined efforts of Todoroki's ice, Iida's desperate but hindered kicks, and Deku's unseen, pervasive grave dominion slowly began to wear Stain down. He was a formidable foe, but he was fighting against an increasingly overwhelming, multifaceted assault. Deku created the openings, forcing Stain to overextend, allowing Todoroki to land a powerful ice blast that finally trapped the hero killer. As Stain lay defeated, Deku, still largely unseen, felt a wave of exhaustion. His quirk had been pushed to its limits. But looking at the two rescued heroes, and the finally safe Iida, he knew it was worth it. He had faced the true darkness, and his grave dominion had proven to be a force for grim justice. He was truly becoming the hero who operated in the shadows, bringing the grave to villains. The aftermath of the Hosu incident was a blur of police reports, emergency medical attention for the victims, and a gnawing anxiety for Deku. He had slipped away from the scene as the pro-heroes secured Stain, his cloak of grave dominion ensuring his subtle, unseen departure. Now, the weight of his actions, and the secrets he held, pressed down on him. The first place Deku headed was the hospital. He found Iida in a recovery room, hooked up to monitors, his arm in a sling. Todoroki was there too, sitting silently beside the bed, his expression grim. Native, the pro-hero Stain had initially paralyzed, was in another room, recovering. "Iida-kun," Deku whispered, rushing to his friend's side. The worry that had been gnawing at him finally found release. "Are you all right? I was so worried when I got your message." Iida's eyes, though still tired, widened as he saw Deku. "Midoriya-kun, you were there too." He looked from Deku to Todoroki, who was already staring at Deku with an analytical gaze. "He was," Todoroki confirmed, his voice flat. "But not in the way you think, Iida. Midoriya was different. I felt his quirk, that chill. It was like I was fighting both Stain and a ghost." Deku braced himself. There was no hiding it now. He looked at Iida, then at Todoroki, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, I was there. I tracked your message, Iida-kun. I knew you were in danger. My internship with the Darkside Collective, It's about learning to operate from the shadows, to use my grave dominion to disrupt and disable without direct confrontation. Iida, still weak, pushed himself up slightly. The chilling sensation, the way Stain was hindered, slowed, that was you, Midoriya-kun. But I never saw you. That's the point of my training, Deku explained, a tired but resolute look on his face. My quirk lets me subtly manipulate the environment, density, temperature, even a localized sense of dread. I can also cloak myself. I was creating openings for you in Todoroki, making Stain vulnerable, influencing his movements. I couldn't beat him head on, so I had to make the battlefield my domain. Todoroki nodded slowly. It makes sense now. I felt it too. The air getting heavy, his attacks losing power, that sudden unease. You were like a phantom force, turning the tables without ever being seen. He paused, his half-and-half expression revealing a rare flicker of admiration. It was effective, dangerous, but effective. Iida, however, looked down, a wave of shame washing over him. Midoriya-kun, Todoroki-kun, I am deeply sorry. I acted selfishly. My desire for vengeance clouded my judgment, and I put myself and native in grave danger. You both risked your lives because of my foolishness. He struggled with his words, tears welling in his eyes. You fought like true heroes, even when I had fallen from grace. Deku placed a comforting hand on Iida's shoulder. We're heroes, Iida-kun. We look out for each other. You made a mistake, but you're learning. We all are. Just then, Detective Tsukauchi entered the room, his expression weary but relieved. He explained the official cover story. Endeavor had arrived and defeated Stain, a necessary fabrication to maintain public order and avoid a panic over such a dangerous villain getting so close to the students. However, Tsukauchi said, looking directly at Deku, then Todoroki and Iida, your unapproved involvement means you will receive a severe reprimand. Your internships may be affected. But unofficially. He paused, his gaze hardening slightly. You three saved lives. Native is alive because of you. What you did was heroic, even if it broke every rule in the book. He then looked pointedly at Deku. And your involvement, Midoriya, was quite remarkable. We have never encountered a quirk used in such a fashion. Deku felt a sense of quiet vindication. His unique path, his dedication to mastering his grave dominion in the shadows, had paid off. He had come to Hosu to save his friend, and he had done so, not with a public display of power, but with the chilling, unseen hand of justice. As they left the hospital, a new dynamic had settled between the three students. Iida, humbled and grateful, now looked to Deku with a profound respect that went beyond his class president title. Todoroki, ever analytical, saw Deku not just as a rival, but as a complex, powerful force operating on an entirely different plane. The bonds forged in the chaos of Hosu, amidst fire and shadows, were stronger than any rulebook. The Undertaker had faced his first true villain crisis, and in the chilling aftermath, his resolve, and his understanding of his own power, had deepened irrevocably. Returning to UA after the internships felt different. The usual boisterous energy of Class 1A was still there, but subtly altered, tinged with the weight of real-world experience. Every student carried a story, a new scar, or a hardened glint in their eyes. For Deku, the change was profound. He walked into the classroom, his trench coat a familiar comfort, but his posture more self-assured. The ambient temperature around him was still slightly cooler than normal, a testament to his constantly active grave dominion, but it was a controlled chill now, not a nervous one. He saw the subtle nods of recognition from Iida and Todoroki, a silent acknowledgement of their shared, unspoken ordeal in Hosu. Bakugo, predictably, was as loud as ever, but Deku noticed a flicker of something new in his explosive eyes when their gazes met, a grudging respect mixed with simmering frustration. The sports festival and the Hosu incident had changed the landscape of their rivalry. Aizawa, looking slightly more rested, though still wrapped in bandages, addressed the class. All right, everyone settle down. Hope your internships were enlightening. Now, let's hear about your experiences. Who wants to go first? One by one, students shared their tales. Hiroshima recounted his time with Fat Gum, emphasizing the importance of a strong defense and the complexities of undercover work. Kaminari sheepishly admitted to some embarrassing moments with Best Jeanist, but also spoke of learning greater control. Uraraka had found inspiration in her combat-focused internship, pushing her limits. When it was Deku's turn, a quiet anticipation fell over the class. They knew he had chosen the enigmatic, dark side collective, and whispers about his unique involvement in the Hosu incident had inevitably circulated, albeit vaguely, through the school grapevine. Deku stood, the shadows in the classroom seeming to deepen slightly around him. My internship was with the Dark Side Collective, he began, his voice calm and deliberate, carrying an almost unnerving resonance from his enhanced vocal projection. It was focused on deep-seated threat neutralization and unconventional heroics. He chose his words carefully, honoring the collective's secrecy while still conveying the essence of his growth. I learned to utilize my grave dominion in ways I hadn't imagined, he continued, a subtle shift in the air temperature around him demonstrating his point. Beyond combat, I refined my environmental manipulation for infiltration, reconnaissance, and psychological disruption. I learned to track emotional residue, to move unseen, and to impose my presence without direct confrontation. It's about operating in the unseen spaces, bringing a chilling certainty to those who operate outside the law. A few students shivered, not from cold, but from the unsettling imagery. Even Aizawa's eyes seemed a little wider than usual. And, Deku added, looking directly at Iida and Todoroki, it allowed me to assist in the apprehension of the hero killer, Stain in Hosu. A collective gasp swept through the room. While the official story of Endeavor's solo triumph was public knowledge, the truth within Class 1A had been a closely guarded secret among the three. Now, hearing Deku openly acknowledge his role, even vaguely, brought the reality of it to life for the rest of their peers. You were there too, Midoriya. Mina exclaimed, her eyes wide. He fought Stain. Mineta shrieked, fear evident in his voice. Bakugo simply grunted, a furious, knowing look on his face. He'd sensed Deku's presence in that fight, the pervasive chill that cut through the chaos. Aizawa interjected, while Midoriya's involvement in Hosu was, outside official protocols, it demonstrates the critical thinking and adaptability required of true heroes. His growth in understanding and applying his quirk is undeniable. You all have grown. But remember, the professional hero world is not a game. It's dangerous, unpredictable, and always watching. As the day ended, Deku felt the subtle shift in how his classmates perceived him. He was no longer just the earnest, anxious boy who mumbled. He was the Undertaker, the chilling champion of the sports festival, the silent force of Hosu, and a student who walked a path distinct from any other. The secrets of the Darkside Collective and the depths of his grave dominion were still largely his own, but the seeds of his unique hero persona had been firmly planted, ready to sprout into something formidable. The return from internships brought a palpable shift in the air of Class 1A. The students, seasoned by real-world hero work and tempered by encounters like the Hosu incident, carried themselves with a newfound gravitas. The Undertaker, in particular, was seen in a different light, his chilling presence now imbued with the silent authority of experience. The calm, however, was short-lived. Aizawa, ever the master of abrupt announcements, delivered the next challenge that sent a ripple of apprehension through the classroom. All right, problem children, he drawled, his eyes scanning their faces. Hope you all enjoyed your internships. Now, it's time to put all that newfound experience to the test. The final exams are coming up. A collective groan, quickly followed by nervous murmurs, filled the room. The internships had been intense, but the final exams at UA were legendary for their difficulty. These won't just be written tests, Aizawa continued, his voice flat. There will be a practical component. And unlike previous tests, this one will be designed to truly push your limits, individually and as a team. It will assess your growth, your problem-solving skills, and your ability to adapt under pressure. He paused, letting his words sink in. The practical exam will involve facing off against your teachers. Yes, you heard me right. Each of you will be paired up, and you'll have to work together to overcome a pro hero. The class erupted in a mixture of fear and excitement. Facing pro heroes was a monumental challenge, a true measure of their progress. Whispers immediately broke out about potential pairings and who would face whom. Deku, now the Undertaker, felt a familiar surge of both anxiety and grim determination. His grave dominion had evolved significantly during his internship, becoming more refined, more insidious. He wondered how it would fare against a seasoned pro hero. Could his chilling presence truly bind a professional, or would his unconventional tactics fall short? Your performance in the sports festival and during your internships has been noted, Aizawa said, his gaze specifically lingering on Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki. Some of you have shown remarkable growth in unique areas. Be prepared for a test that demands more than just brute force. It will require strategic thinking, teamwork, and the ability to utilize your quirks in ways you might not have considered. He then flicked a switch, and the monitor behind him displayed a list of names. The pairings and your assigned pro-hero opponents will be announced closer to the exam date. For now, focus on your academics. And be prepared to show us how much you've truly learned. This is your chance to prove you're ready for the Provisional Hero License exam. The gravity of the announcement settled over the class. The final exams weren't just about passing, they were about proving their worth, about showcasing their evolution from ambitious students to emerging heroes. For Deku, it was another gauntlet, another step on his unconventional path. He would need to master every nuance of his grave dominion if he was to overcome the formidable challenge of a pro-hero. The bell was about to toll for the next stage of his journey. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and now we will see you in the next video.